Hey everyone, happy Monday. You're watching TechStrong TV. I'm Alan Schimmel and today is September 14th. Thanks for joining us. The beginning of a new week here. It's an exciting week. We have some really great news to share today, but I've got to tell you we are going to be sharing some great news all week. We have a special live event taking place this Wednesday. Stay tuned for details. I'm afraid I can't tell you more about it right now, but as the week goes on, we'll give you more information on that. It's going to be an exciting week of stuff. Let me do share some news with you right now, though, and also tell you a little bit about what we have in store for you on TechStrong TV today. First of all, I wanted to mention that you're watching an award-winning video series here. TechStrong TV, we announced last week, was the recipient of a Platinum Award, a Platinum.com award, which was pretty cool for a video series. It's nice to get recognition for what you're doing. Of course, we don't do it to win awards or get recognition. We do it because it's like what we like to do. But nevertheless, TechStrong TV won for a video series. Our DevOps Unbound won for video podcast, which was pretty cool considering we only have about three or four episodes done. And the CISO Talk also won for news and information video. And that's pretty cool when you think about it. So 3 different video awards. I will tell you, as the founder and MediaOps CEO here, we made a bet on moving to more video a couple years ago. We just felt it was the way people were going, and it's good to see some recognition of it. It's good to see it happening. But I think the bigger recognition is the fact you're sitting here watching it. And thank you for that, and we'll continue to keep doing the best we can to bring you the best information, news, interviews that we can. That being said, let's jump into a couple things. First of all, our first guest today is my friend Manish Gupta, the CEO of Shift Left. Shift Left had recently announced their NG SAST solution, and it's now available in the GitHub marketplace. What does that mean for developers? What does it mean for security? What does it mean for this whole Shift Left movement? Manisha and I talk about that. Then, Splunk has been doing a series of virtual events around DevOps. Their next one is, I believe, on Wednesday, and it's on observability in DevOps. And we're really happy to be joined by Mark Chaporis and Ajit Mukhari from Splunk, who are presenting at this event. And you can check it out. Mark and Ajit will give us the lowdown. Speaking of virtual events, we've been announcing quite a bit. We just finished our DevOps India Summit last week, which was pretty good. I presented there. But in coming up early October 1st, we have our Operationalizing Cloud Native with Kubernetes virtual event. We have some really great speakers for that, some really great sessions, great interactive activities. Then at the end of the month, we'll also be doing our DevOps Experience, our 3rd annual DevOps Experience virtual event. And looking forward to that as well. We've already got Kosuke, founder of Jenkins, lined up to headline that, as well as some other surprise guests, including John Willis, and I'll keep the rest as a surprise. But October is such a busy month with DevOps and cyber and cloud native events. There seems to be one a day. So it's going to be a busy month, and I think your time is going to be at a premium. Which of these events do you want to attend? And, with so many of them free, it's great because you can kind of hop and watch events on demand and everything as well. I want to mention a couple of other events, though, that we're going to be promoting here and on TechStrong TV at MediaOps. One is an event on low-code, no-code, which will be happening in November. And then in December, we're announcing an event called Pretty Good Stuff So that's in December. November is low code, no code. Also, the DevOps Institute, of which we're a co-founder, will be having their Upskills Festival in December. So it's going to be a busy, busy time. By the way, MediaOps is sponsoring as a media sponsor several other events, and we'll be giving you more information on that in the next days and weeks to come. But back to the Splunk event, as I mentioned, Mark Chaporis and Arjit Mukherjee will be talking to us about their observability session for the Splunk event Wednesday. After that, though, I'm really happy and proud to introduce another new series to our TechStrong TV lineup. And this one is a friend of ours, Gary Berman. Gary is the kind of genius behind the unsung heroes of cybersecurity comic book series. He's been doing that for a while. Gary recently started up a video series called Cyber Superhero Show, and we have entered into an agreement. The announcement just came out, I think, today. We've entered into an agreement with Gary where we will be producing the show along with Gary. Gary, of course, will star in it and source a lot of the talent and guests and so forth. We'll be promoting it. We'll also be distributing it via TechStrong TV, Security Boulevard, and Digital Anarchist. You know, Gary has an interesting background. He was basically a marketing business executive in a company he started, and the company was basically taken out from under his feet. And it was done with some cybercrime, frankly, right? He was the victim of some cyber crimes, and he kind of hit rock bottom. And, you know, trying to make lemonade out of lemons, he wanted to understand more about cybercrime and about cybersecurity and how it affects our everyday lives. And that started him off on a whole new career, going to conferences, meeting people, talking, understanding, trying to learn about cybersecurity. And along the way, Gary's personality is such he made a lot of friends, met a lot of people. And these are folks who are now coming on the show and will be talking about great topics around cybersecurity. So this is the first episode of the Cyber Superhero Show, co-produced between with Gary and here with MediaOps. We hope you're going to enjoy it. We'll be doing a couple of these shows a week, and they'll also be available individually on Digital Anarchist as well as Security Boulevard. So welcome, Gary, and good luck. Then after that, for something old, we're going to go way back over a year, about a year ago, to DevOps Experience 2019. I mentioned DevOps Experience 2020 is coming up October 22nd. Well, back in 2019, and my God, it was a year ago, but it seems so much longer with everything that's come under the bridge since then. Gene Kim headlined our DevOps Experience 2019, and Gene gave us a preview of, at then, his new book. Now it's a year old, called The Unicorn Project. And of course, was a follow-on to the Phoenix Project. It wasn't a sequel per se, but it took place in the Phoenix Project universe. Let's put it that way. And it was a look at functional programming, and excellent book. It stands on its own, separate and apart from Phoenix Project. And we're going to listen to Gene talk a little bit about it from the DevOps Experience of 2019, as I said, a year ago. And hopefully that'll get you revved up for DevOps Experience this year. After that, I'll be back with the news, and then I'll turn things over to our managing editor, Charlene O'Hanlon, who has Mike Pavik, VP of Product Engineering at Upwork. And Mike and Charlene are going to talk about lessons learned from a fully remote company on how to support and engage a fully remote staff effectively. Something a lot of us are dealing with right now. Charlene also has a webinar preview. We have some great webinars in addition to everything else going on this week at MediaOps. So do check that out. Then we have a channel roundup with our friend Mike Vizard, who has an interview with ServiceNow. and about how to rein in cloud costs, which has become a priority lately. The FinOps Foundation, which is part of Linux Foundation, is all about this. And I think it's going to be something that's going to be heavily featured in our FinCon DX event I mentioned earlier in December. After Mike, though, we're going to head over to the analyst corner with Mitchell Ashley, founder CEO of Accelerated Strategies Group. And Mitchell today has an interview and a discussion. Well, first he's going to talk about real-time systems and data analytics in his specialty domain. That's rapidly becoming a critical strategic area for many businesses. But he's going to talk about real-time streaming analytics. And then he's going to have on as his guest today, Dr. William Bain, CEO of Scale-Out Software, to dive into that a little deeper. And then I'll be back to wrap things up. It's an amazing show today. We hope you're going to enjoy it. Let's take a quick break for a commercial right now, and we'll be back in about 30 seconds with our first guest.
Join topic experts and peers for a Splunk virtual event. Observability to enable your digital initiatives. Are your apps and services distributed in the cloud, getting refactored as microservices, or becoming more complex? If they are, you must factor in observability. Observability is all your data to help you find unexpected failure conditions, explain why they happen, and resolve them fast. This event is about the challenges, opportunities, and best practices to successfully build observability into everything you develop, deliver, or monitor. Register today.
Okay, so our first guest today is Manish Gupta. He's the CEO founder of Shift Left. I know Manish many years from his days at McAfee, and then starting Shift Left, and he's been here as literally DevSecOps has shifted security left. Manish and Shift Left recently came out, as I mentioned, a new NG SAST static solution. It's now available on the GitHub Marketplace, and I think it's a great place to be, and I think it'll be available on other marketplaces soon. So let's hear what Manish Gupta has to say about it, and here's my interview with him.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another segment here for TechStrong TV. My guest for this segment is my friend Manish Gupta, CEO at Shift Left. Shiftleft.io is the website if you're interested. Manish, welcome back to TechStrong TV, my friend. How are you?
Thank you, Alan. It's doing great. Always good to be here.
Absolutely. Manish, I think it might have been the last time you were on with us, or maybe the time before. You guys had just announced sort of a new product that was, squarely aimed at developers. Security for developers as part of the kind of the Shift Left mission. And recent news is that this is now available on the GitHub Marketplace. But before we get into the marketplace and GitHub and so forth, why don't we talk about the solution itself?
Yeah, of course. Right. So what we talked about last time was what we call next generation static application security testing, or next generation code analysis. And the intent is, as we are all writing more and more software, right? How do we find vulnerabilities very quickly and very accurately so that developers can fix them efficiently, right? And historically, we've all talked about how developers don't like to do security. And that is true, but that is largely because, we've asked them to use tools that cause a lot of friction. And so with the end goal in mind that, yes, it is the developers who are developing code, and it's only developers who can fix that code. Security cannot, DevOps cannot, no one else can. How do we make it much more efficient for developers to find and fix vulnerabilities?
Agreed. And now this is now available in GitHub Marketplace.
Indeed.
And I think most of our audience are familiar with GitHub Marketplace, which is similar to, AWS marketplaces and various other Azure Marketplace, various other marketplaces where if you're using a particular platform, in this case GitHub, right, these are tools that are kind of approved and certified to work within that platform. So in this case, of course, it is GitHub. And for people, if you go to the GitHub Marketplace, it's not hard. What do they search for, Manish, to find it at the GitHub Marketplace?
Yeah, they can just search for shift left, and they should find the shift left NG SAST solution.
Okay. I just want to make it easy and kind of lead them to that. So, Manish, but let's talk a little bit about what it means, right? Because there was a time, and you and I are both in security a long time, right? There was a time where the idea of putting a security solution into a Git marketplace for developers was, don't waste your time, right? What are you, crazy? Right? Why would developers be looking at security solutions? But of course, the world has changed, right? DevOps and the whole shift left movement has changed the game. It's not just DevOps though. It's also the role of the developer today, right? Security is more and more within their purview, within their control, within their domain, if you will. And so we need it.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, what we do, right, is, think about the best analogy to perhaps use is the foundation of a structure, right? So let's say you were building a house, or you were building a bridge, or you were building a skyscraper. If the foundation of that structure was to begin with weak, right? As you would agree, no matter how much reinforcement you put on the building, it's really not going to help, right? And the foundation of software is the code itself. And if there are mistakes made in the code, it does not matter how many firewalls or how many intrusion detection systems or how many antivirus agents you use, hackers will be able to exploit your code, right? And so it is widely acknowledged that, yes, we need to get better at writing more secure software. Now, this is not going to happen just because we decide to, for today, for example, today to say, oh yeah, today we're going to start writing secure software. No, developers don't get trained on writing secure software most of the times. Developers are tasked and therefore measured by their speed of development, right? Bugs and the quality of the software. Notice that none of this discussion did security ever come up. Yet it is imperative that we help developers write better software, secure software, because of the foundation analogy that we used. And so the idea is to do code analysis, but to insert it seamlessly into the developer workflow. And as we've seen with many other tools, whether it is, let's just talk GitHub, right? Or GitLab or on-prem Git or tools like HashiCorp. If you make it easy for developers, if you make it a seamless part of their workflow, then they can get things done. They will get things done. And that's the whole goal that we have at Shift Left. And so while putting a code analysis solution like Shift Left in the GitHub Marketplace might not seem like a major milestone, because after all, if you search the GitHub Marketplace, you will likely find other code analysis solutions also. So it is not just the fact that Shift Left is now available in the GitHub Marketplace that is noteworthy. What is noteworthy is here is, for the first time ever, a code analysis solution that is available for developers to just try on their own, without asking their AppSec people, without picking up the phone and talking to someone, without ordering something which comes on a server that they have to install in their data center, right, and so on and so forth. Like all the other tools, like let's start with GitHub, right? Developers could just show up, create an account, and start using it, right? exactly the same way, they can do the same thing now with shift left. So in other words, the availability of shift left in the GitHub marketplace is a culmination or coming together of various advantages, technology advantages within shift left that allows us to do this.
Agreed. Agreed. But so Manish, there's something to be said for that. I had a conversation a little more than a month ago, with a friend of mine, executive in a container security, right? Container security space, and I asked them, why don't you just put it out there? And they were like, oh no, this is much too hard for the average, container developer or ops person to use. We could only let them use the product or even have a free trial if they have our sales engineers, installing the product, walking it through them, training them on it, using it for the first couple of weeks so they can see the value. And I think back, Manish, that's something we were doing in 2005, right? The idea of producing software today that you can't try for free, if not use for free forever, that you need some kind of sales engineer to come kind of help you recognize the value. It flies in the face of everything that's going on today. It flies in the face of DevOps and DevSecOps and just the whole way that the ecosystem seems to work today. It's kind of like, you can't use this software without reading the manual, and no one reads the manual. So
Right.
It's the same thing.
And in fact, almost argue that it is worse, the fact that like for example, our documentation is on our website, right? But you require hand-holding by a sales engineer, which just goes to show that if someone has to handhold you for you to experience the product, inherently means that it is complex, right? Inherently means that the dashboards or the way you need to integrate is not intuitive enough, and therefore someone needs to help you. And so, look, this has not been easy for us either, right? I mean, we've been on this journey for almost 2 years now, trying to constantly reduce the complexity to the point where now you literally can use your GitHub credentials, right? You don't even have to sign up to shift left by creating an account. You can literally use your GitHub credentials, submit an app, all within the GitHub workflow, and you get results in a matter of minutes, right?
Absolutely.
That is the future. That is the future of code analysis.
I think it's the present as well, right? It's or the near present. Manish, the other point I want to make is, in the continuing evolution of shift left, we've seen the rise of GitOps, as it's called, right? So when we first started with shift left, DevSecOps, continuous testing, right, it was all about that CI/CD pipeline, and so much of, especially with security, if the point of deployment was midnight on a clock, so much of the security of the DevSecOps took place at like 5 minutes to midnight, or up to 15 minutes after midnight, right after deployment. And the idea with shift left was continue shift left, shift it further left.
Correct.
Now with GitOps, we have an opportunity to really, we're shifting to 45 minutes before midnight. We're shifting earlier and earlier into that life cycle where you get a lot more bang for your buck, in terms of being able to fix bugs and issues that early in the process, because there's a lot less dependencies and everything else. But at the same time, we're almost shifting responsibility for DevSecOps out of DevOps and squarely onto the developer, right? Which is different.
Yeah, you've highlighted several points in that narrative, which are all very, very important points, right? One thing is, and there have been various studies, our data shows the same thing, that if you were to do security at the 11th hour, right, versus doing it in the shift left approach, cost of security is 15 times higher if you do it at the 11th hour, right? So number one. Number two, yes, I think GitOps is a huge innovation in how software is developed, i.e. the modern software development lifecycle. And there is a unique opportunity now to therefore rethink how security should get done, right? But there is some complexity. I mean, very far left, I mean, if you're using a repository, you could be using GitHub, GitLab, on-prem Git. If you're using a continuous integration tool, you could be using Jenkins, Circle, many other variations. And so, yeah, you know, the tool that you choose, the solution for code analysis that you choose has to be able to work with a variety of these tools, right? And at the end of the day, I think our philosophy is, look, developers are very good at finding and fixing bugs, right? But developers have not done as good a job with security. And the fundamental question is why? Well, it's because if we just sort of visualize a developer, let's say me, I write some code in GitHub, and because of GitOps, as soon as I'm finished writing it, I do a pull request and my code gets compiled. And within a matter of minutes, literally, I get feedback as to the code that I developed. Did it compile successfully? Are there any major errors? Perhaps some unit testing got done. So I get immediate feedback, right? And this is happening in my private branch. And so I have not really aired my dirty laundry. I can go fix the bugs. Contrast this with security. I finish writing the software, it gets compiled, it gets merged into the main branch, you write some code, and then perhaps a third person writes some code. And at the end of the day, someone does code analysis. 3 days later, someone comes to me from application security saying, Manish, the software that you developed 3 days ago has some security issues, right? Now you should go fix it. As you can imagine, right, what have I been doing for the last 3 days? Twiddling thumbs, waiting for AppSec to come back to me? Not really. I've moved on to doing something else. And now to do security, it impacts my productivity. I'm having to choose between working on the next feature that that I've told my manager will be out by the end of the day, to choosing between security. Clearly, most developers, because they're almost never measured on the security, will choose the former. And so over time, we continue to accumulate debt and we have issues like Equifax, right? Now, how do we fix this? Well, I mean, the blueprint is readily available in front of us, like we discussed, for finding and fixing bugs. Well, security needs to do the same thing. As soon as I write code and as soon as some continuous integration tool compiles it, in a similar parallel fashion, security should happen. And I should be told within a matter of minutes, not hours, not days, that Manish, the software that you just wrote caused these vulnerabilities to take place. And what's more, application security requires that this particular code, because it's customer facing, deals with sensitive data, should not have any SQL injection errors. And with that immediate feedback, again, within my private branch, so it's not even in Jira, it's not being told to anyone else, I have the opportunity to fix it. And what we find is that 70% of the times, if you follow this flow, 70% of the times, the bug is fixed within the same, or the security issue is fixed within the same sprint, right? Where there is a competitor of ours, which is one of the largest companies in this space. They publish an annual report where they say that something like 0.3% of the bugs are fixed in less than 15 days. So compare 70% versus 0.3%, right? I mean, that to me is the statistic that we are most proud of.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, again, it's getting that developer involved early on. Now, of course, there's a caveat, and I think you and I touched on it the last time, which is there a point where we're putting too much on the developer's plate? Right?
Oh.
Testing, security, developing, obviously, right? Right. When is it enough? How do we help that developer? We need to automate more. We need to, have better workflow. But when is enough, and what can we do?
Yeah, a great question. Look, I think in the world of application security, even if you don't do shift left, right? Be it the trend shift left, be it the solution, i.e. my product, which is shift left, even if you do not do that, even if you use legacy code analysis solutions, 60% of the application security work has to be done by developers, right? Because this just happens to be a space that if there is something wrong in the source code, as you can imagine, the only person who has both the understanding and the access to that source code is the developer, right? So my point there being that just because we are shifting left, the onus on the developer isn't increasing. In fact, it's declining, it's reducing, right? Because as opposed to having to do things in a reactive fashion and causing impact to developer productivity, by seamlessly inserting security into the developer workflow, we achieve both higher quality of security and higher developer productivity, right? So that's one important thing to mention. I think coming back to your question, I think just because we ask developers to do more doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, right? Sometimes when you ask developers to do things by creating purpose-built solutions like ours, you find that the overall efficiency of achieving the same end goal is much higher, right? Now, having said that, of course, we should always be asking the question, is this something that can be done better by security, by DevOps, by someone else other than developer? Right? And if the answer to that question is yes, then yes, we should look at how we don't burden developers, because you're right. Over the last 5 or 6 years, we've increasingly asked them to do more. But I think this also, last thing I would say is this also points us to the trend where developer is not going to be one homogeneous role, right? Developers have clearly evolved to become DevOps. Right. Similarly, I think some of our customers have what are called security champions, which to me are precursors of DevSecOps. These are developers who used to have a developer role till yesterday, but now have become security champions, and they're helping the development team at large better understand the security implications. So notice that not often do these people come from application security, right? They are developers who have taken on this role. So I think, yes, that is an important point worth repeating is, developers is not going to be in a homogeneous role. It's going to evolve into multiple facets that are required by an organization.
Fair enough. Manish, we're about out of time, man. Thank you for coming on today, though. It's always a pleasure to sit and chat and talk about shifting security left, and of course, shift left the company. Congratulations on getting the static code analysis up on the GitHub Marketplace. And I imagine we'll be seeing it maybe on other marketplaces going forward.
Indeed. Our goal is by the end of the year to be in all the major marketplaces. Even today, while we do not support, for example, while we are not in the AWS marketplace or Azure marketplace, the tool does work. The solution works seamlessly with those products too. It's just some incremental work to put it in the marketplace itself.
Excellent. All right, we're out. Manish Gupta, Shift Left, here on TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with our next guest. Our next session features Mark Chaporis and Arjit Mushikari of Splunk. Arjit was the CTO of SignalFX, and Mark has been working in the observability department at Splunk now, or division at Splunk, for a couple of years. Splunk has been putting on a series of virtual events around DevOps. Their next one, I believe, is this Wednesday. Mark and Arjit are presenting on observability. And we had a great discussion around observability and what they're presenting on. Let's now go to my interview with Mark and Arjit to find out more.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another segment here on TechStrong TV. Today, this segment, I have two guests, if you couldn't tell from their smiling faces on your screen. We have Arjit Mukherjee and Mark Chaporis. And if I mispronounced anyone's names, I apologize in advance. But Arjit, Mark, welcome to TechStrong TV, guys. How are you?
We're doing great. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's great to be here as well.
You know, one of the interesting things about doing this show during COVID times is, you know, we do everything via Zoom or remote like this, is the interesting backgrounds people pick. Some people prefer, you know, the au naturel, as Mark has here, and some, you know, tell me they want to be somewhere on a nice island sitting on a beach.
That is correct.
You know, but
I want to be on an island too, don't get me wrong.
Yeah. And what's interesting is you guys are just seeing this green screen behind me as we tape this, but of course, for our viewers at home watching this, they're going to see me sitting like overlooking Fort Lauderdale. So yeah, I guess someone should do a study about what does your background say about you. But anyway, but Mark, I do give you extra points because it looks like you got a little Pokemon going on there.
Absolutely. I had the team vote this morning. Should I keep the Pokemon in the shot or out of shot? Everybody thought we needed to keep it. They love them.
I give you extra points for Pokemon. Good style points. Anyway, guys, let me. We went off on the wrong tangent here. Let's bring it back. Mark, Arjit, tell us a little bit about yourselves, where you work, and we'll jump on from there. Arjit, why don't you go first?
Cool. Again, Arjit Mukherjee. So I am a technologist. I'm at Splunk. I'm a distinguished architect at Splunk right now. And what I'm focusing on is Splunk's observability portfolio. So as you know, Splunk is getting heavier and heavier in this space. It's a very exciting space. And so that's what I do. I came here to Splunk through acquisition. So I was part of a company called SignalFX, which was in the observability space. And I was CTO there. And I've been doing this for a long time. I was working on observability, helped set it up way back at Facebook, circa 2007 and later. So this is sort of a passion area for me. So again, so happy to be here and talk about observability.
Yeah. Yeah. Observability is a passion area for me as well. And while Arjit is working on our observability product suite, I'm actually doing the observability for Splunk Cloud. And so we actually have thousands of servers and thousands of customers, petabytes of data that we're actually working through. And I make sure that we are providing observability to the developers and engineers to make sure that we can keep that stable and available. I've been with Splunk for about a couple of years now, but been in the observability space for quite some time. Previous to this, I actually founded a brand new startup call in the Kubernetes observability space. So happy to be here. Excellent. And it's fun to work with Arjit and sometimes against Arjit.
Very cool. You know, Arjit, I will tell you that SignalFX was always my choice for one of the best interfaces I've ever seen. I used to love you guys, your UX. And whenever I go to a conference, back when we had in-person conferences, and you know, I'd stop by the SignalFX booth and get a demo or see always really just a really nice job. So you were the CTO there. Congratulations on that. Of course, it's come under this. It's now part of Splunk Observability, and you know, quite frankly, the name observability itself is sort of a new term that we're seeing bandied about. We've seen APM and AI ops and you know, a lot of different names for observing, measuring Absolutely. What we see going on in our applications and so forth. Interesting, you know, as things evolve.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Arjit. comment.
Yeah, so I was going to say you're right. So this is new. So when we got started off, we used to call it monitoring, right? And then as sort of, I think it's a necessary term almost, because in my mind it helps frame the newness of the challenges that a lot of our sort of newer infrastructures, newer processes are bringing. Where I think the fundamental idea is that what used to work in the past doesn't work anymore, because my monoliths are gone. I have 100 microservices. My servers are gone. Now I have VMs, and each VM is running hundreds of containers. So everything is just so much more numerous, so much more complicated. The dependencies are more complicated. So you need a new way of looking at things. And I feel like observability, in a way, brings that sort of frame of minds to us, in a way where we are saying that things are so complicated that you cannot just know every possible way that things are going to fail and just look out for the stuff that you kind of know might fail. Instead, it flip the bit and collect all the telemetry and then analyze it later, because who knows what the next problem is going to be, sort of. And so I think that's really the mindset change that observability brings to the table, at least in my mind.
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
on the other side
How
of
about
it,
you, Mark?
I think observability is amazing because it allows us to focus really on the behaviors and the culture, not necessarily just the tools. Because I actually think that what's really powerful about observability is the way you can understand your system and communicate about it. I mean, clearly there's a ton of problems that are happening that you've never seen before, you couldn't expect to happen. But the way to solve those actually has to do a lot with the behaviors and how you're actually making change to your system and validating those changes to your system on a story by story, epic by epic, customer by customer basis.
But when did you start using the term observability for what you do? Be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I guess probably 2017 came around. I mean, I think that Corey Watson at Stripe kind of put it out there in Monorama. I mean, clearly Charity Majors and Honeycomb were pushing it forward. But what I really enjoy is the focus on the behaviors and the cultures and just moving away from the tool set. It's not logs, metrics, and traces. It's how you're using them in order to move your engineering more quickly.
Excellent. So we've had a great conversation already. Of course, we didn't get to anything we're supposed to cover, but we'll get there. What I wanted to talk to you both about is just this Wednesday, right, the 16th. Splunk's putting on a little virtual event, a DevOps event. They've been doing a series of DevOps events, actually, since COVID and everything was put an end to, obviously, for the time being, in-person events. But this Wednesday's event is on DevOps and observability and enabling your digital initiatives. For people who want to register, it is a rather long URL. I apologize.
Yeah, go to events.splunk.com. That's your best place to do it.
Absolutely. Go to events.splunk.com. Mark, good stuff. And both of you are speaking, I understand, at the event.
That is correct. So this event is all about sort of focusing on observability as a concept. Why is it important? Why does it need to go hand in hand with DevOps and leads to success? So not only understand it as a concept, but also get a sense for what kind of tools are out there that get you there. And as well as there will be some talks about like sharing experiences from those who've done it best. So it's best practices. It's learning from people who sort of tried them and learned some good lessons, as well as sort of just focus on the importance of this in DevOps digital transformation. So that's sort of the high level goal. There's quite a few very interesting talks from speakers from different companies. Of course, Mark and I will be speaking, but there's speakers from other companies like Puppet and Catchpoint, JFrog. So quite a few that are out there.
Mark, I'm going to, thanks, Arjit. Mark, specifically, what are you and Arjit speaking about?
Yeah, well, we're really talking about the three things. What are the patterns you can employ in order to kind of use observability to speed up your DevOps? Are there any standards that you should be applying across your organization, or not standards, in order to be able to allow flexibility there? And then what are the keys to how can you actually future-proof your system as you're working into observability and things are changing very, very quickly? How can you work with your engineers so the work they're doing today is not out of date here in 9 months as we move forward and tools change and the problems change?
Agreed. And I think that is one of the things, that injects maybe instability is that the rapid pace of change. You worry about, is the investment I'm making right now going to be worthwhile 6 months, 9 months, a year, 18 months out from now? And, at some level, what choice do you have, right? You gotta do what you have to do to be competitive and maintain. But secondly, it's also inherently kind of the nature of the beast that we live in, right? Which is we are constantly moving the ball, right? It's like the old, I used to have, my family, like all of us in the tech industry, right? You become the in-house IT support. And your family would come and say, I'm thinking about buying this computer, it's on sale. Do you think it'll be, worthwhile in 6 months or a year? No, in a year it's going to be old. But if you wait a year to buy next year's computer, that'll be old in a year too. At some point, you put your flag in the ground. You do what's today, and I think people have to recognize that when it comes to observability and the way we're developing and releasing and maintaining software and monitoring it, right?
Yeah, and I think it actually really, it's most important really where the developers are in the code, like how are they instrumenting, adding the libraries in their system, and how are we collecting that data? I definitely think that the tools where you're actually visualizing, you might be investigating or monitoring or alerting down the line, those things are going to change very, very rapidly. But if we can find some sort of common pattern on what you're actually instrumenting in your code that is going to enable and support that change over time, I think that's really important. I think there's really exciting work going on in the open source field in that area right now, specifically around open telemetry.
Yeah. No, so I'm sorry, Ajit, you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say too, I think Mark's point about having some good best practices and standards really hits home, because if you think about it, like Amazon's cloud services really came out of beta 2008. And here we are 12 years after the fact. And the way we do software and services is absolutely changed. Like containers, Kubernetes came out 5-6 years ago. Again, who writes software without using them at this point? So I think the thing to note is I don't even want to know what's going to happen 5 to 10 years from now and how we're going to have to be monitoring and observing them. So I think, of course, the things that we monitor, etc., are always going to change. Even the tools that we use for observability, many of them were not even present if you go back 10 years ago. So change is going to happen. So it's really about understanding some good principles or standards or ways of doing things that are a little bit more future-proof, right? Because change will happen. So what are some of my guiding lights, so to speak? I think that's very important. So we need to have some level of centralized sort of thinking in an org as it's scaling, as it's growing, as it's changing about how do I want to approach this subject? Because it's very critical to my success in some sense.
Absolutely. Look, on Kubernetes, I think 5-6 years ago, it was still in beta. Yeah, I don't think it came out of beta until maybe 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago.
Right,
something
yeah.
And I just saw a survey this week. 75% of all new cloud deployments are kube based. So, go figure. There's the proof.
We can argue whether that's great or not, but regardless.
That's a different argument. It's not going to fit in. Won't fit into this segment.
Yeah, what we do know is the observability challenges for a dynamic system like Kubernetes are very, very different than on the VMware instances of the past and how you monitor those things. And so that's the exciting thing, is changing so quickly.
Yep. Mark, you also mentioned, though, open source projects like Open Telemetry, which a bunch of folks and companies are kind of coalescing around as an open standard here. I think that's part of future proofing too, is not getting locked into, the old black box kind of closed source solutions. Because I think when you bet a little bit on open standards, open source, you have more visibility into where it's going, what's going on, what the community is doing, what best practices are emerging, rather than getting locked into one vendor and their roadmap, so to speak, right? And I look, I've been in tech a long time. I've been there, right? I've been locked into those roadmaps, and it's hard, right? This gives you a much more, I think, versatile, agile not agile like Scrum, but nimble kind of roadmap or a path that you can follow.
Well, yeah, I think it just adds to a versatility in the future, right? So as engineering leader, I can say we're adopting this open standard and we're going to adopt vendor A or vendor B or this open source product that's going to go along with it. But because I'm adopting that standard, it allows me flexibility in order to move to X, Y, or Z in the future. And it's so valuable, even just as you're selling a direction internally of the organization, that you're selling that flexibility along with it.
Yeah. So especially with open telemetry, as you know, Splunk is now getting very much into it. So we truly believe in open source, open standards on the customer environment as much as possible, because I think not only is the question of lock-in, in my opinion, open standards, open source is almost a requirement, because given the rate at which innovation is happening and given the rate at which cloud services are adding new service pretty much every year, how is a one company with a few engineers ever going to keep up with the pace of things? You really need to depend on the community to even just keep up. So it's not just a question of, lock-in. I think it's a question of how do we keep up? How do I know, speaking of innovation and future-proofing, how do I know that I'll be able to support all the things that are coming down the pike later? And of course, there's a third aspect to it, which is sort of trust. Security is a big issue. The more I can have transparency to what I'm running in my environment, I think the better it is. And so there's many reasons why I think this is taking off. And Splunk now is actually coincidentally the biggest contributor to open telemetry in the industry right now, because we're sort of gone whole hog into this, and we are sort of really pushing this.
I wasn't aware of that. And of course, open telemetry, I had read somewhere, was the second most active project in CNCF right now. I imagine maybe behind Kubernetes. But there are some great projects within CNCF. But I mean, clearly it's there, and it's driving so much. And there's Prometheus, some of the other ones. There's a lot of good, and that I think is a sign of a healthy community, right? It's a healthy community with options, with projects out there, people coming around them, supporting them. And I think that bodes well for our future. We only have a minute or two left here, guys. I wanted to talk specifically about the event. And I don't know how much both of you are involved beyond presenting. But for our audience out here who says, maybe I think I'd like to go sign up for this, right? It doesn't cost any money. What, beyond kind of just listening, what kind of, is there an interactive sort of element to it where they can maybe get to talk to some of you and the other speakers and so forth?
Yes, so as part of the talks, I think some of them will have a question answer capability. So where at the end of the talk, the speaker may want to take some questions. Another thing is, so we're also going to have virtual booths where you could come and visit us, because a lot of times what we find is these discussions tend to become more involved and not something that a quick 5-second answer might be sufficient. So we want to have those sort of deeper conversations. So I think there is opportunity to actually come and engage with the speakers.
Very cool. And so both of you are presenting. I guess we could get schedules. We're about out of 20 minutes. Arjit, Mark, thanks for joining us. Just as a reminder here, though, this is Wednesday, September 16th, and you can register. As I said, it's free, I believe, at events.splunk.com, and it's on DevOps and Observability. You can see people like Arjit and Mark and some other great folks around observability there as well. So check that out. Arjit, Mark, thanks for coming on TechStrong TV today.
Alan, this is awesome. Thank you so much for having us. Next time we get together, I really want to shake your hand, though.
You know what? It's probably be next year, my friend. But I'm down with that. I haven't been home this long in about 25 years. How I'm still married, I don't know. But anyway,
that's exactly right.
I think we're all in this.
Yeah. So right? It was also my pleasure to be here, Alan. Yeah. And hope to see you folks at the event.
Soon, hopefully. Mark, Arjit, be well, be safe. Good luck at the event Wednesday again. That's events.splunk.com. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with our next guest. Up next is, I'm real excited about this. I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we're adding another new series to the TechStrong TV Digital Anarchist family. And this is Gary Berman, the Cyber Hero Adventure Show. I gave Gary's background earlier. He'll probably give it to you a little bit in the beginning of his show. You know, we're co-producing it with him and distributing it. Sponsorships are available if you're interested, but I think it's just a great show. You're going to enjoy it. You're going to enjoy listening to Gary and some of his guests. So let's now go to Gary Berman and the Cyber Hero Adventure Show.
Hello, and welcome to the Cyber Hero Adventure Show. Today's show focuses on answering the question, why are information sharing and analysis centers, ISACs, the key to winning the battle of the digital universe? Stay tuned to find out. I'm your host, Gary Berman. Our mission is to shine the light on the people and organizations who keep us safe online, while at work and home and school, and to serve as a business-to-business networking platform for the cybersecurity and information technology communities. We've learned that 55% of human communications is nonverbal. That's why we include a video feed, so that you have the option of seeing our guests or simply to just listen. You're never going to know who's going to connect with and how you'll be able to maximize opportunities resulting from hearing from our guests. As the victim of a series of cyber attacks, I've learned that the only time that you hear about hacking or cybersecurity is when the criminals win. Well, not anymore. Let's begin by saying thank you to today's panel of unsung cyber heroes who represent the countless people who toil in anonymity to keep us safe at work, home, and school. Denise Anderson currently serves as chair of the National Council of ISACs, and she's president of the Health Information Sharing and Analysis ISAC. Prior to HISAC, she was vice president of the Financial Services ISAC, where for almost 9 years she helped the ISAC grow and achieve its successful status in the information sharing community. She has over 25 years of executive management level experience in the private sector. Hi, Denise. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Gary.
We're so glad that you're here.
I'm delighted to be here as well.
Our next guest is Scott Algier. He's the Executive Director of the IT Information Sharing and Analysis Center and Executive Director of the Industry Consortium for Advancement of Security on the Internet. Scott works at the intersection of cybersecurity policy and operations. He's the founder, president, and CEO of the cybersecurity consulting firm Conrad, Inc. Hey, Scott, so glad you're here.
Thank you, Gary, for having me. Thank you.
You're welcome. Our next guest is Faye Francie. She's the executive director of the Auto ISAC. She has over 30 years of diverse experience in government and industry, specializing in forensic chemistry, aviation, security, and network systems. Faye and her team serve the global automotive industry through analysis and sharing of trusted and timely cyber threat information about existing or potential cyber-related threats for on-road vehicle electronics and associated networks. And she loves math. Hi, Faye.
Hi, greetings, Gary and all. Thank you. Thank you for having us today.
It's my pleasure. And last but not least, we have Carlos Kazee. He's the Vice President of Intelligence at Retail and Hospitality, ISAC. Carlos has significant government-to-government and government-to-industry legal and policy interpretation and development experience in the areas of information technology, knowledge management, sensitive information sharing, and sensitive information protection. Hey, Carlos, so glad that you're here.
Gary, I am honored to be here with these folks who have over a century of experience in this field. And they're my mentors and friends, so thank you for having all of us.
You're welcome, and thanks for all of you for doing what you do. Denise, let's begin with you with kind of answering what I think is the most important question, because a lot of times in these types of shows and webinars and things, people appropriately spend much of the time talking about what they do. But I would like to know why you do it. What is your mission?
So I consider myself an evangelist for information sharing. I've done it all over the globe, and it's not an easy thing to do. People don't share information for a lot of reasons. But I've been doing it for a long time, and I realized actually one time I was on stage speaking, and I started thinking about it. I was like, I've actually been doing information sharing for decades before I actually did an ISAC. I was actually in credit and collections for a large media organization, and we would meet monthly to share information with each other about debtors and fraud. And it was the same kind of thing. It's all about community and getting people to understand that helping each other helps the entire community. And that's my mission, I think, is to get people to understand that and believe it and do it.
You know, it's really great to hear, because one of the things that I found rather surprising when I first started listening and learning about this ecosystem and the community is how the bad people, so freely share information. You can get anything you want, on the dark web, and they even have some kind of Yelp rating system for the quality of the delivery. Why are the good folks a little bit slower to have caught on to the benefit that you just described about information sharing? Or is that not the case? Are they at parity?
No, I mean, one of my lines I always say is shame on us for not sharing. And there's a lot of reasons why people don't share. And believe it or not, some of them are kind of silly. There are, of course, legal concerns, and a lot of corporations will clamp down on what people can share. But again, that's an education process that we need to overcome. There's also people feel intimidated when we see on list servers that they may feel like, oh my gosh, the big boys are talking, and if I chime in, I'm going to look kind of silly, or if I have a question, it's not going to be looked on as that I know what I'm talking about. So there's the whole bunch of things about ego, not wanting to share because of legal concerns or because they're afraid that they'll look bad. You name it, there's a whole reason why we don't do it. And really, it's, again, that education of understanding that when you share information, you're not only helping everyone else, you're also helping yourself.
Yeah, indeed. So, speaking of information, Scott, there's so much when it comes to cybersecurity and information technology. It's essentially the whole world, and everything in it touches tech. Maybe you can share with our audience a little bit about critical infrastructure and how those definitions come about, who is responsible for creating them, and how does all that work?
Sure. Thank you, Gary. So there actually is a legal definition of what critical infrastructure is, but it's best to, I think about critical infrastructure in broader terms instead of the legal terms. So critical infrastructure are those technologies and services that you need to enhance the economic security of the country and the public health and safety of the citizens. So things such as power, communications, health. These are core elements of the critical infrastructure. There's 16 critical infrastructure, designated critical infrastructure sectors. Many of these are managed by the Department of Homeland Security. Others are managed by other sector-specific agencies. For example, the Department of Treasury works very closely with the financial services sectors. And this is really important because the concept of critical infrastructures the majority of them are owned by industry, but it's a national security concern that these are secure. So the whole concept of what we've been working on together over the last 20 years or so is getting industry and government to collaborate in a partnership. And this entails collaboration on policy issues, as well as operational cyber threat information sharing issues to help the industry and government better understand what the threat is and to take protective measures against the adversaries.
And, within that, there are many different government agencies that, cybersecurity and IT touch, probably all of them. Maybe you can share with us a little bit about CISA and what their mission is.
Sure. So CISA is the designated cyber agency, DHS, and they're responsible for forming a lot of the public-private partnerships that are needed for this collaboration. So for example, within the IT industry, CISA is our sector-specific agency. They're also working very diligently on elections security. And they also have an operational role where they do a lot of the cyber threat analysis, issue alerts through industries, and does coordination across the government in issuing threats and alerts.
And so speaking of threats and alerts, Faye, the sector that you focus on, the automotive sector is incredibly omnipresent for everyone. We had the good fortune recently of having on the show Kevin Tierney, the VP of Global Cybersecurity for General Motors. And one of the most fascinating aspects of that conversation was their pivot to creating medical devices, ventilators and cybersecurity, within that. How would you assess the state of vehicle cybersecurity right now?
Well, the overall state of the vehicle cybersecurity, as we know, is emerging, right? So it's pretty exciting times for the automotive industry overall, with the movement towards autonomous vehicles and more, right? Including vehicles that fly in the air and land in various places, urban mobility vehicles. So lots is happening in the industry. With that, of course, with COVID, that was a major impact to all of us, as we know. And now they did pivot very quickly to support the nation in building those ventilators. And several of our members did that. So we really take our hat off and thank them for their ability to do that and move into a manufacturing space of what was really, truly needed at the moment. They are starting to get back. Obviously, with COVID still very active, things are a little slower than normal as far as the industry goes. But having said that, we haven't stopped here in the ISAC. So things are very active here. And in fact, as we know, as COVID is happening, there are other opportunities for those bad guys to try to play some nefarious tricks and so forth on us. So we are seeing upticks in certainly ransomware. We are seeing upticks in malware insertion across the industry. And so we've been probably more active than we've been in the past, actually, as this COVID has hit.
That's an interesting insight, which, I've heard echoed before, that, this is one sector, the work that all of us collectively are engaged in, unfortunately, is going to never go away. In fact, arguably, it's going to become more and more critical. Speaking of critical, Carlos, the two sectors that you focus on, retail and hospitality have undergone massive disruptions, as you well know. How do you get them to focus on cybersecurity during this time of change?
Well, that is a really, really good question. It's significant to recognize, I think, that everybody is impacted, has been impacted by COVID. Faye brings out a really, really good point. The threat actors have not changed in the sense that, hey, we're going to give you a break. In fact, they've done just the opposite, and they've been even more opportunistic. I think retail and hospitality are not unique in terms of all of the sectors. If you were to ask Gary which of the sectors is more or most vulnerable, generally, or even at this time, I think the only actual great answer would be all of them. Because we are all battling against an aggressive and opponent that is well-connected, that's entrepreneurial. And I think retail and hospitality, while at a little bit of a disadvantage because you fund security with revenue from sales and activities like that, we recognize that we have to be on our game all of the time. Our companies are adjusting to that dynamic, with new themes of the same old activities and threat actor activity and things of that nature. I think the one key to our sector is we don't necessarily have to challenge or encourage people to work together. The margins are so tight. The threat is so great, and the importance of security is so tantamount, because we can't sell in e-commerce if we don't have a secure infrastructure and a trusted infrastructure that people have confidence in. So people are willing to work together. This is my third ISAC, the current position I'm in now, working in, and I've seen in no other sector the amount of willingness and eagerness to work together across company boundaries and even across verticals within our sectors of industry. So it's a real attractive environment for what Denise had talked about: collaboration and partnership, and effective information sharing, both threats as well as vulnerabilities and best practices.
Gary, if I could chime in, I was just, because Carlos teed something up in my mind. All of our members of our ISACs are competitors. But if you noticed, I never used competition as a reason for why people don't share information. And it shouldn't be a reason. And that's what's amazing about all this, is that these companies understand why it's so important to be sharing with each other, because it is, again, a community. It is an ecosystem, and we all rely on each other to make sure that we are able to even exist as industries. So, I think it's really a lot of kudos for those companies and organizations that belong to ISACs and really believe in information sharing, because competition is just not even a factor.
I mean, that's a monster idea and accomplishment, to all the members, of the ISACs and the work that you do as leaders of your sectors. Denise, you are also very involved with the National Council of ISACs. So that would be an umbrella organization where you have the various, let's say, 16 verticals beneath them. How's that going? I mean, it must be like herding cats.
Absolutely not. I mean, really, we all work really well together. We're kind of like an ISAC for ISACs, so to speak. Interestingly enough, we have 26 members now. And
Is that 26 verticals then? When you say a member?
So, and that's what's interesting. People get confused with that. So not all the sectors have ISACs. Some have operating components, but many sectors have subsectors. So for example, in transportation, or let's go energy because it's a little simpler. Energy, we have oil and gas, downstream natural gas, electricity. So there's a pipeline is another factor. So many of those subsectors have ISACs, and then they share information. As far as the council is concerned, we've been around for over 15 years. We're a voluntary body, so we've been around for a long time. And it's where the ISACs got together and said, you know what, we have challenges and common issues that we face. Let's share information with each other. Why not? And the cross-sector is so important. And I can't say enough about how we share information with each other. I mean, I consider Scott, Carlos, Faye, and many of the others that are members of the National Council of ISACs as true friends that I know I can rely on if I ever needed to get help in a certain area. And when an incident happens, we're immediately deciding, hey, is this something bigger than our own ISAC? Is this affecting the cross-sector? Should we be sharing with each other? So we're constantly thinking that way and working with each other to make sure that we're solving issues that arise.
So here's a particular one that's germane to your sector, but also everyone. What's your take on the reports that Russian hackers are attempting to steal biomedical information?
So I'm not surprised, because this is something that goes around. It goes on all the time. So it's not new to COVID. Obviously, there's a little bit of a spotlight on it now. And there's been a lot of articles in the media about the hospitals being extremely targeted during COVID. We're not seeing that really as a sector. I mean, yes, it's we do see some targeting, but I would say it's more opportunistic versus actual abnormal targeting. The pharmaceutical manufacturing firms and the medical device manufacturing firms are constantly under attack from nation states who want to get their intellectual property. So it's not really anything new, so to speak. So Yeah, some of that's going on, but I would say it's not anything out of the ordinary, if that makes sense.
I mean, to those of us maybe on this panel, it makes sense, but to, a citizen, it's kind of mind-blowing. Scott, speaking of mind-blowing, what's your take on the recent Twitter hack and its effect on everything?
Yeah, sure. So I think the situation Denise was just talking about, which is where these nation states targeting private sector infrastructure, I think is a really important point. If you don't mind, if I talk a little bit more about that first, and that is, in private industry now, we're expected to defend against nation state attacks, who are very well funded, highly sophisticated. And I think very few organizations can do this on their own. So one of the values that the information sharing community brings is the ability to cost effectively scale internal cybersecurity capabilities and programs. Because now instead of just having your own internal team of analysts, you can compare notes and talk to other analysts from peer companies who are experiencing the same attacks from the same threat actors. So it really gives you an excellent forum to share knowledge with each other, and it helps scale your costs, because nobody can hire all of these analysts internally, but now you have access to these analysts who are more than willing to share with you, and because they're fighting the same battle you are. So it's a really an excellent way to help scale up capabilities and try and make it more manageable for these organizations to combat these nation state actors. I think, on the Twitter attack specifically, I think there's a lot yet to be learned about that attack and how it happened and what happened. So looking forward to hearing more about it. But it also highlights the concept that everybody is vulnerable. Right, there's not a company in the world that is not vulnerable to a well organized and well orchestrated attack, whether it's from a nation state or smart hackers.
Just to build on that, I recently had the privilege of giving a keynote speech to many members of the federal government, the Department of Defense, regarding the CMMC, which, of course, all of you know are the requirements, the emerging requirements for everyone who wants to do business with the Department of Defense, maybe 300,000 or so businesses, but then also other ones down the supply chain to have a minimal cybersecurity and to matriculate up. Faye, you are in an industry that is incredibly supplier driven. You have so many. How many suppliers, are in your world, if there's any way to dimensionalize that, and how does your sector work on ensuring cybersecurity, not just compliance, but that they're not attack vectors, for someone else?
Well, it's a great point, Gary, right? So the supply chain could be considered maybe the soft underbelly. Like if they couldn't get into the OEM, can they get in through perhaps a supplier, a tier 2, tier 3 supplier? So they're definitely a potential vector. And so it's really critical that that supply chain and all that the manufacturers do are aligned, that there are cyber best practices. And one of the things we did in automotive is when we started, we decided to build 7 best practices that the members wanted to look at. And they determined what they were, they helped build them. And basically what that did was bring in the whole of the industry to pull together, to build these best practices, to understand together. And there's so much more work to be done along those lines of how does that impact contracts? What does that look like? What do we do from what you were talking about, the CMCC activities, the ISO and SAE standards development. There's a lot of work being done now along the idea of the entire supply chain, right? Making sure that we do the critical work that's needed to support everyone, to educate everyone. As Denise said, this is really a lot about education, communication. And of course, it does change the way we do business today versus what we did in the past when there was no cyber attack.
I'm sorry. I was going to, if I could just add to that, for retail and hospitality and everybody that's involved in e-commerce or brick and mortar sales or anything, we're so dependent on third parties. We can't, there's such a high number of people who are involved, the third parties that are involved in transactions, and managing their security, the impact of them on our compliance and our security. We're all learning how to do that better. We're all learning how to do that together. And we're bringing in people into the conversation that aren't necessarily the security people, because third parties can have an impact on security, they can have an impact on efficiency, they can have an impact on compliance. And so it's within each of the companies, it's also kind of creating a focus and a sell. It's not just a security problem, it's the marketing, the chief digital, it's everybody working together, chief legal.
That's really...
Oh, sorry, Gary. I was just going to say, too, some of the major attacks we've had were through third parties. Petya, not Petya. Yeah. That was through an impacted accounting firm in Ukraine that if you did business in Ukraine, you had to do your accounting and taxes through this one of two firms, and one of them was this one that got impacted. And it had major, major consequences across the globe. So just amazing.
And Carlos, I wanted to build on something that you're alluding to, which is, when people think about cybersecurity, the vendors, for example, the vendor ecosystem is usually focused on large enterprises. But in your sector, certainly, in retail and hospitality, you have a lot of small to mid-sized businesses. What would your advice be, pertaining to small to medium businesses and how they can protect themselves? And can they be part of ISACs? Can anyone become a member? What's involved in that?
That's a very, very good question. I think every ISAC has a culture, and Denise kind of articulated it well when she was describing the National Council as well as describing her ISAC journey. I think that one of the key elements of an ISAC, because we're sector-wide, we're looking at a sector of industry, is our ISACs are always going to be diverse. We're going to be diverse in terms of size and in terms of maturity. And I think that's one argument in favor of the ISAC model, because that diversity gives us a bit of strength in the sense that there's always somebody that has tackled that problem before me and maybe has a novel solution set or a unique perspective about the range of solutions that I can learn from. And I think that lends itself to a highly collaborative environment. I think that for small and medium-sized companies, or for companies that have less maturity in terms of security, being a part of an ISAC is essential. It's critical. And I think for larger, more mature companies that have the ability to invest more in terms of security, having the opportunity to connect and coordinate with their peers in a neutral sort of non-antitrust environment like an ISAC is essential. So I would almost say that the business case for connection within an ISAC and membership in an ISAC pretty much has nothing to do with your size or your maturity.
And also just for our audience, we're going to include in our show notes contact information of our guests and how to become members of ISACs, and any other links that any of our guests want to include. Just make sure to send them to me and we'll execute on that. Carlos, you mentioned earlier the word diversity. And one of the things that it was very apparent in my listening and learning to now hundreds of thought leaders is the lack of diversity in the cybersecurity and IT ecosystem in terms of, let's say, gender or race and ethnicity, things like that. With everything that's going on now with Black Lives Matter, what's your take on the state of the IT and cybersecurity, communities, and what can we do to accelerate, that and improve it?
I love that question. I really appreciate you asking that question also. I think that there are two facets of that problem in our society today. I think that when we look at Black Lives Matter, when we look at Me Too, and when we looked at just the general perception of fairness, what it boils down to is we have to inspire and maintain an environment of opportunity for everyone, right? And that opportunity has to not have anything to do with the amount of resources available to a particular school system or location. And I think that we have to intentionally make investments in that area to make sure that that doesn't happen. So I think one facet of our current environment is opportunity, just ensuring that there's opportunity. I think the other facet of it is that, if you go back to kindergarten, first grade, when you got those little report cards and you were evaluated on good citizenship, works and plays well together with others, that's really important. Why that isn't in every report card all the way through, the 12th grade and beyond, I don't get it, because the biggest problems that I see, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's Me Too or anything else, it's not necessarily the root cause isn't necessarily the color, the heritage, or the gender, or other perspectives. The root cause is an inability or an unwillingness to give basic dignity and respect to someone else for whatever reason. And so as managers, as supervisors, as peers, as mentors, we have to instill within leadership and within our organizational cultures a perspective that dignity and respect is something that adds value, adds capability and capacity to our mission. There are a countless number of geniuses that, for one reason or another, we have probably pushed away because we failed to give them the dignity and respect that would allow them to thrive in our environments. And whatever the other issues are, the root cause, in my opinion, is that absence of dignity and respect.
And Faye, you're nodding your head. Would you like to amplify that?
No, I think Carlos did a beautiful job on it. Communication, respect, dignity, all of these are really critical elements, and it's critical elements to everything that we do in an ISAC. We work with a very wide variety of folks, of course, across the ISACs with different company structures, rules, et cetera, and this platform has to mimic that as well.
Yeah. One thing, Gary, I'd just like to add, we have a tremendous opportunity. I think all of us as organizations do. There's quite a large number of historically Black colleges and universities and historical Hispanic institutions that have great cyber programs. And the challenge for, from me to Pure ISACs and other organizations, many of whom are already doing this, is to reach out to those institutions, have capture the flag exercises, tabletop exercises among their cyber talent. You'll be very, very impressed with the hunger, the appetite, and the need for mentorship, that exists in those communities. And so I think there's some great talent there just waiting to be plucked and pulled into situations of importance in our organizations.
I think role modeling too. I mean, being a role model and showing that it can be done, I think is really important.
It's interesting you said that, Denise, because my better half, Valerie, who's the smart one of our family, recently wrote a blog post about the difference between influencers and role models. And when I read it, I said, wow, this is really insightful, because, society spends so much time on following the trends, in popular culture, and they buy things, based on that. But what is the difference of role models? If you look at all of you, you are by any definition great role models. And by the way, Carlos, I think you just gave me the title for our episode, Works and Play Well with Others, Join an ISAC. I mean,
it's like everything I knew in kindergarten, because I always say that all the time.
Yeah, so good for you, Carlos. By the way, we're hiring. I just can't pay you anything, so in case you're interested. But works and well and plays well, with others is definitely, a good mantra and philosophy for life. So Scott, speaking of that, working well and playing well with others, how do you manage stress?
Do I manage stress? Well, that's a really interesting question. I go for walks. I need time to decompress. I try to do run in the morning and before I start the day to get my mind around what I need to do. I'll try to do one in the evening to get my mind around what I just did and what I missed, and try and do some deep, some more strategic thinking. One of the things that occurs to me, and I think others, is that we get so caught up in all of the urgent items that are occurring. We all have 1,000 things to do, both with work and family, people working from home. There's now more family obligations with people, with everyone at home. Just you're so busy doing throughout the day, doing the things that need to get done, that I find for myself having some quiet alone time where I can think about more strategically about what I've accomplished and how I need to do things differently is really important. And then I also, in the morning, it's also important to have a good spiritual life and have someone else know that there's a higher purpose to what I'm doing other than just to get throughout the day. So it's really important for me to balance, my private time to help my mental health and my spiritual health.
Just to share with you a little bit of a build on that thought, as I was processing all this information of things that had happened and all the lives that were destroyed by the hacks that affected us, I happened to come across a quote from Albert Einstein, which I thought is cool, because of science and physics and mathematics. And so a reporter once asked him, he said, Mr. Einstein, on one hand, you have science and physics and mathematics, and on the other hand, you have the possible existence of God. How do you reconcile those two things? And he paused reflectively and said, coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. There are other words for that, like synchronicity or luck or randomness or chaos. I mean, who knows? But if you ever hear me say, oh, we're having an Einstein moment, that's the point and the North Star. So Denise, tell me about some Einstein moments that you've had. Have you had some things that are just so mind-blowing, beyond coincidental that you go like, whoa, maybe there's some other higher authority or something like that?
The thing that immediately pops into my mind is I was working as a publisher for a cleaning magazine, actually, believe it or not. And
cleaning? Did you say?
Yeah, cleaning. Yeah.
Like cleaning things?
Cleaning houses and buildings. Yeah.
Wow.
So, very interesting. A very interesting field, and actually very important nowadays with COVID.
Yes.
But so when I had first joined the organization, I met one of the people that served on the board of directors. It was an actual association for cleaning contractors, and he was an entrepreneur. He had started his own company, and very successful man, very nice man. He was a bear of a man, really, a really kind of gentle giant. Whatever image that brings to your mind, that's who he was. But he was so welcoming. He wrote me a letter. He said, oh, Denise, we're so glad you joined us, blah, blah, blah. And he was just the nicest person in the world. And one day he had come up for a board meeting. It was actually a committee meeting for the magazine that we produced. And he didn't show up. And they went and checked at his hotel room, and they found him on the floor. He had passed away, unfortunately. And it was, we were all shocked. It was very sad. But one day I was sitting in my office, and my office overlooked a busy street, and it had like a ledge that was probably like an inch wide. And a bird all of a sudden perched there on my windowsill and started tweeting, and then it flew away. So I didn't really think anything of it other than, wow, that's odd. That's never happened before. And later that day, I had written an editorial in the magazine about his, this person and just how great he was and what he had done for the community. And his wife called me that day, and she said, Denise, that was such a beautiful tribute. Thank you so much. And, Art was just the greatest person. He would sit outside every day and he would watch birds. And I was just like, wow.
That's a good one. And of course, I have to ask about Twitter and tweet again. I'm sorry, I was just, it's too obvious. But thanks for sharing that. Faye, why don't you share with our audience an Einstein moment, if you've had them?
Oh, there's just been so many over the years because I'm old, right? So I've had plenty.
No, wait, time out. This is a live edit. You are experienced.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. One of the, I'll really make this personal and talk about, my own career in the Boeing company. And I really morphed from aviation and air traffic management into, sort of managing a very large portfolio in Boeing for network systems. And ultimately, we could sort of start to see the beginnings of this, what I call this cyber tsunami coming. And it concerned me particularly on the commercial side of the business, where we weren't doing a whole lot protecting our aviation networks. And so I did a little research and I did a little homework, and I learned about the National Council of ISACs, and I was able to meet Denise Anderson and Scott Algier, who were in the National Council of ISACs. I got to meet them, and ultimately, I sort of also knocked on the government's door, and I got to meet Carlos, who was at DHS at the time. And so I pulled together what I thought was a plan of action to go take a look at that, and I gave them that information. And it just kept reminding me what great folks that were over on this side working it, and how cool it was to be in a nonprofit and to be sharing information and securing the whole of industry. I really loved it, but of course I had to go back to the position that I was in. And I made 3 predictions thanks to pretty much these guys that are on here helping me understand that problem a little bit better. And those 3 predictions actually came through. So those are probably the Einstein moments inside of Boeing, which I won't talk more about. But through that, it basically catapulted me back into ISAC land to go do an aviation ISAC. And ultimately, when I retired from Boeing, brought me over to automotive. And I remember Denise telling me at one point, she said, just start sharing, and whatever you do, it'll come, right? And I'll never forget that. In fact, I use that all the time. Just start doing it, right? And one of the challenges we've been having is bringing in IT and OT, because we're very product focused. And I use that same quote again. And so here it is 15 years later, I think it is, Denise, I'm still using your quote. So it really was a great moment for me to meet all of these folks. They are incredible leaders across the community. They do amazing things, and I've learned so much from them. And it's so nice to end my career working together with these types of folks. So thanks.
Who says it's the end? Guys. Who says it's the end?
Well, sooner or later. Retirement looms.
I think it's going to be much later because we need great thought leaders, and we need to share information. A rising tide lifts all ships, for sure. Carlos, you want to share an Einstein moment?
I would. One thing that was really, and it's very similar to Faye's story, but working in the Department of Homeland Security, as Scott had alluded to, predecessor organization to CISA, same and similar work and activity, had the privilege of working with ISAC organizations, and I always wondered, what is the glue that keeps them together? Because one thing I never saw when, we meet with companies, we meet with associations, and I always see competition, company to company, association to association. But whenever I met with an ISAC, I saw a solidarity of purpose and of intent. And that was really, really cool. And one of the things I was committed to do is kind of, being equal to their, excellence on the government side, which I don't think I did a good job of, but we tried, sort of. But I did meet at one point a lady named Susie Squire, who was pulling together an ISAC organization to broadly cover what was then the retail sector, but it was clearly not just retail. It was gaming casinos, it was, hotels, and it was, consumer packaged goods. It's like this, huge, thing, and they were doing it the right way. And I was so encouraged and so inspired by people who are entrepreneurial in this area of doing good. We see organizations today, that are coming about, like, our Maritime Transportation System ISAC, our Space ISAC, new members of the National Council of ISACs, that we're continuing that sort of development. So long time ago, I kind of thought, wouldn't it be cool to not be in government where, you get a little frustrated sometimes with trying to make things work, but having so many barriers, impediments, and obstacles. And I remember having a short conversation with Susie that, wow, I envy what you're doing and where you are. You need to connect with this National Council of ISACs as well, but I just envy where you are. And now, I think it's about 10 years later, I'm working for Susie Squire at the Retail and Hospitality ISAC. So it's just interesting how things come full circle. And I could not be more privileged or proud to be a part of the organization.
Wow. I don't know if you can see with my green screen, but I'm getting goosebumps.
So, hey, Gary, if I may, I don't, I have a lot of Einstein moments in my life and like spiritual moments, but some would say I have some Hello McFly moments too in my life. I think influencers in my life and in my professional experience, there were people who came before us, right? So we've been doing this a long time. But the late great Howard Schmidt, when he was with Microsoft, helped to establish the IT ISAC. When I first got my role, when I first got my start here, there was a gentleman named Guy Copeland who was the original graybeard of the industry and forming industry government partnerships. Our colleague John Sabo, when he was with the IT ISAC, he helped form the National Council of ISACs. So there were, and one of the great things being in my position is that we've had a tradition in the IT ISAC up until a couple of years ago, where we every year we had a new president. So I had great leaders come through as presidents of the IT ISAC, including Marianne Davidson, the chief security officer at Oracle, and then other people who have become friends of mine. So it's really a collaborative community. The cybersecurity world it's big, but it's also really small. And there's, especially in this information sharing space, while I'm really have been lucky to kind of, really fall into this space, I started as a temp to help out somebody who had this as part of his portfolio. So it's been great, opportunity to be here and grow, but it's also, we need to recognize that, there were people who helped pave the way for us, and there was a blank slate when they started over, and they laid excellent foundations for us. And part of my mission, and I talk about it with my team, and I talk about it with others, is my mission is to carry on the great work that came before me.
Well said.
And to that end, as we're coming down the final stretch, Faye, you and I had a conversation about your upcoming conference that you're having in October. The original aspiration was to have it in person at the General Motors headquarters. Now maybe that's not so feasible because of COVID. How are those plans coming along, and how should our audience learn more about them? And then I'm going to ask each of you if there's anything else you wanted to amplify about upcoming events or ways that our audience can interact with you. So Faye, we'll begin with you.
Oh, thanks for that. Yeah, so unfortunately, we won't be doing the summit in person this year in Detroit as planned, but we will be doing it virtually. And there's been a lot of success with ISACs doing virtual summits, so we're looking forward to that still. And so more information can be found online at www.automotiveisac.com. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And Denise, one of the things that I'm really curious about is, can you dimensionalize the membership of all the ISACs? Like, is there a demographic profile? I mean, how many companies or individuals are members, or how do you describe that?
So I think Carlos said it earlier. You've seen one ISAC, you've seen one ISAC. So I think every one of the various ISACs is different and have different models in how they operate, although we're very similar on a basic level. Like in healthcare, for example, we have pharmaceutical manufacturers, medical device manufacturers, actual hospitals, small practices, x-rays, laboratory, radiological, pharmacies, and payers, so your insurance companies. So we have a very diverse group of people. Other ISACs are very specialized in their group. And our members, I'd say one thing that we have in common is our members are organizations, and within those organizations, they have employees. So you could have one organization and maybe 20 of their employees are participating actively in the ISAC. So you compound that by the number of organizations that are members of the various ISACs. But it depends on the nature of your sector. For example, freight rail, there's only 9 freight rail companies, so you're a little bit limited in scope on who's going to be a member of your organization as compared to something like financial services, where there's tons of banks and markets and credit unions across the globe.
Wow, that's an incredibly interesting answer and depiction. If you've seen one, you've seen one. Yet you've been able to find the common threads that essentially, a rising tide lifts, all ships, and it's a very powerful, galvanizing, theme. And if we can get everybody to, to play nice, that's the idea. Carlos, did you want to talk about your Einstein moment? I don't recall. Did we miss that, or are you?
No, you did. You didn't. We got that.
Okay. So is there anything else you'd like our audience to know that would help amplify the mission in, hospitality and retail sectors?
I think that there's a lot of depth to our sector and to our ISAC, just as Denise said, as there are to others. And I would encourage you to either go to the National Council of ISAC site or to our site to see more about us, but to see more about ISACs in general. I love what Scott said when you asked the initial question about critical infrastructure, and Scott alluded to not only national security, but also national economic security. And I think that ISACs are that sort of balancing act, right? Because national economic security, I think there are 3 elements, to national security. There's the security of the nation from a defense perspective. There's the security of the nation from an economic perspective. And also, I think that there is the security of the nation and that perception of security and confidence in the systems and capabilities and infrastructure of our nation. And I think ISACs have to focus on all 3 of those uniquely and be a partner of government, be a partner of industry, and also be of high value to the consumer, the citizen. And I think bearing that in mind, that defines that uniqueness that Denise is talking about for each of our sectors of industry.
Wow, that's terrific. And Faye, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, appreciate that. Again, any information, please don't hesitate to contact us via our website.
Okay, Scott, you'll have the last word.
Awesome, thank you. So first, I want to thank you, Gary, for giving us the opportunity of organizing the panel. I also want to just note for the IT ISAC, although we are the Information Technology ISAC, we also support into the food and agriculture industry. We have several member companies from the food and agriculture industry, because they don't, we provide them a forum a private forum for them to share about threats that they're seeing. And we also support the elections industry. So with the voting systems manufacturers, the companies who make the voting machines, they're also members of ours. So we spoke about the diversity and size of membership in member companies that are represented in some of the ISACs. We also are really fortunate that we have a diversity of multiple sectors within multiple critical infrastructure sectors that are represented within the IT ISAC. I don't have any breaking news on any events that we'll be having. There's a couple in the planning stages, virtual events, of course. We have a very active LinkedIn and Twitter account, so itisac.org on the website, and people can follow us on Twitter or on LinkedIn at ITISAC.
Well, on that note, on behalf of a grateful nation, thank you for being the real-life unsung cyber heroes that our mission is dedicated to shine the light on. Words, cannot adequately express my gratitude for what you've done with us here today, but I'll try. Thank you. If you would like to be a guest on our show, just send an email to Gary at Cyberheroes, comics with an S. We hope this helps.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
As I mentioned at the top of the show, we've a whole bunch of virtual events coming up over the rest of this year between now and the end of the year. October, we have two big ones, one on operationalizing cloud native with Kubernetes, and of course our third annual DevOps experience. Last year's DevOps experience featured Gene Kim as a keynote, talking about his then recently released book, The Unicorn Project. The Unicorn Project is not a sequel or even a prequel to the Phoenix Project, but it does take place in the Phoenix Project universe, and it's a good hard look at functional programming and software. It's a great book, actually. I think a lot of people were looking for a sequel, and so when they read the Unicorn Project, they wanted the timelines to be concurrent and the characters and so forth. But that wasn't Gene's intention with the book, I think. He could tell you better, though, and he did a year ago when he discussed this. So this is from DevOps Experience 2019, 1 year ago. Gene Kim talking about the Unicorn Project.
Hey everyone, this is Alan Schimmel. We're here with Gene Kim, best-selling author, DevOps innovative researcher. I don't want to embarrass him, but he's also a good friend. Gene, welcome, and thanks for joining us today.
Oh, Alan, great to be here today, and thanks for making all this possible.
No, you're the one who actually made it all possible when you showed me the Phoenix Project. It's a story for another day. Gene, the new book is due out November 26th. For those who don't know, it's called The Unicorn Project. I don't want to take up too much time with my voice. People want to hear from you. Tell us about the book, what it's about, why it's important, and what was your kind of motivation?
Yeah, so the Phoenix Project came out in 2013, and so much has happened since then. And I think there was a couple objectives that I had that really drove the development of the Unicorn Project. One is, the problems that still remain. For one thing, there's all these invisible structures that are required to make developers productive, whether it's architecture, the management of technical debt, all the systems that developers rely upon to get what they need done. There's this other problem that's almost orthogonal to the problem that DevOps solves. So DevOps is really about, to reduce it maybe over to ridiculous oversimplification, but it was about how do we get code to where it needed to go, which is in production, right? And so that wall of confusion between dev and ops, it turns out there's this other almost parallel universe when it comes to data, that it is so hard to get data from the systems of record or the data warehouses to where it needs to go, which is in the hands of the teams who needed to use it to make better decisions to help win in the marketplace. I think three is, and this comes from so much of the learning in the DevOps enterprise community, if you take a look at these stories that are being told by technology leaders in large complex enterprises, there's so much opposition to the old ways of working. From these functional silos or these conservative institutions, whether it's project management or ITIL. And I think the other part is maybe ambiguity in terms of what sort of things do we want leaders to model? What is actually most helpful? If leaders actually want to get from here to there, what is actually most helpful, to help with this movement? And so the Unicorn Project is really a vehicle to explore some of those things, and like the Phoenix Project, to maybe speculate on what the solutions might be. and it is set in the Phoenix Project universe at the same time. Both are set in the present day, but instead of being told from the operations perspective, it's really told from the development perspective. And it has been so much fun to explore and see the reception so far.
Excellent. Let's for a moment delve into they do take place parallel in the same universe, if you will. But this isn't a serial episode of some TV show or something, right? The characters may have same names, similar type of things, but yet they're different, yeah?
So it's like it's like the Ender's Shadow of Parts Unlimited. So it is on the same timeline, almost exactly the same timeline as the Phoenix Project. The Phoenix Project takes place in the present day. The Unicorn Project takes place in the present day. But there's 6 years difference between the two books. So small things have changed. But we actually get reintroduced to many of the same characters, like Brent, like Eric. I think what's interesting to me, though, is that in some ways, the Phoenix Project was really told through the eyes of Bill Palmer, the VP of Operations, and it was a book about his peers and his relationship up to the CIO and CEO. So I would call that's almost the story of the bridge crew in Star Trek, right? Mm-hmm. The Unicorn Project is really told from almost like the red shirts, right? So in Star Trek, the red shirts were the almost disposable characters that always got killed on the away teams.
Yep.
And so if you take a look at the cast of characters, they're all developers, and so I just got tremendous delight out of being able to talk about the problems that prevent developers from getting their daily work done, told through the eyes of people doing the work at the team level. And so in some ways, in my biggest hopes is that the Unicorn Project, on the one hand, being a book about technologists, actually does a better job in setting kind of the business frame around things like the age of software, age of data, digital disruption, and so forth. That is actually through the eyes of the red shirts where that actually becomes more clear about what those imperatives really are.
It's funny you said that. I pictured it more as a Star Wars than a Star Trek. That's a different argument.
Before we go there, it's funny. It's kind of, in my mental model of the book, it really was, modeled after the heroic journeys told in the DevOps enterprise community, and the mental model of it was, the A-Team, Hogan's Heroes, Star Trek, and the movie Brazil, where the number one hero is the rogue air conditioner repairman. I think played by Robert De Niro. He would break into people's apartments and fix their air conditioning because central services wouldn't do it for them, and thus he's fugitive number one. So I think that's kind of really the story of these transformations and the courageousness it takes to actually even dare to pull one off.
Absolutely. So, Gene, wanted to talk, in the Phoenix Project, of course, the 3 ways became a kind of a very famous paradigm, or actually one of the, the core of the learning from the book. We have a new core learning in the Unicorn Project, right? And it's not the 3 ways, it's the 5, and I'm going to mess it up.
Yeah, the 5 ideals, yeah.
The 5 ideals. Why don't we run through them, if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, in the Phoenix Project, we had the 3 ways. So that's focus, flow, and continuous learning. And then we also had the 4 types of work. And so those are kind of the puzzles that the protagonist had to sort of solve in order to reach enlightenment. So in the Unicorn Project, we have the 5 ideals. And so the first ideal is locality and simplicity. The second ideal is focus, flow, and joy. The third ideal is improvement of daily work. And the fourth ideal is psychological safety. And the fifth ideal is customer focus. And so the first ideal, locality and simplicity, what that really is meant to hint at is that what we want is locality, meaning like when we go out and implement a feature, ideally we have to just understand maybe one module, one file, one application, one container, one something, right? And make the change there, and then we can achieve the goal. The opposite of the first ideal is in order to implement what the business needs, we have to understand and make changes everywhere, every file, every module, every application, right? And so what it means is that we just can't get anything done without being coupled and anchored to everything else, right? So that's the notion of coupling. I think it also hints at like locality decision making. In the ideal, every team can independently develop. They have the expertise and capability to deploy value to customers, but they also have the authority to do that. The opposite of that would be, in order to make any decision, no one can make the decision by themselves. You have to go up to, over to, down to, right? And maybe even worse, you have to do the return path, right? In order to get two engineers to work together, you have to constantly escalate, which seems absurd. There's a measure of this maybe called the lunch factor. How many people do you need to take out the lunch to get anything done, right? Is it 2 pizzas within the team, or is it the entire building, right?
Yeah. Good. You're using an Amazon paradigm, right?
Exactly, right. So that's kind of the first ideal. The second ideal is focus, flow, and joy. And so what I've learned ever since I've sort of really self-identifying back as a developer again, right, for the first time in almost 20 years, it made me realize just how much fun coding is, and when you can have fast feedback, like through continuous integration system or continuous delivery, when you have fast automated testing, it really does create fast feedback. And when you have fast feedback, it allows us to not only get our work done, right, in the sense of focus, but also the state of flow, as Dr. Csikszentmihalyi said in his famous book, Flow, the state of optimal experience. I mean, it really is when that feeling when you just are having so much fun doing the work that time seems to disappear, right? And the opposite of that is you're trying to get your thing done, but you have to go through 35 different committees. Yeah, you have to escalate 2 levels, right? You can't even get the tests to run on your laptop, right? All those things, right? Definitely conspire to make things not fun. Maybe just before I sort of take a little break from this, I mean, I think the ideal, is really epitomized by the tech giants, right? They know that greatness isn't free, that they all know that technically that could kill the organization. And so if you look at the Facebooks, Amazon, Netflix, Googles, 3 to 5% of all developer cycle is spent on increasing developer productivity. So that means that Google does 1,500 developers just on helping other developers be productive. Microsoft, 3,000 developers. In the not ideal case, the people we put on dev productivity and like CI systems, they're the summer interns, right? They're the people not good enough to be real developers. Right. And so, these ideals are meant to sort of really show the contrast between like what the great organizations do and kind of the sad reality that we find that's way too common. Is this resonating with you, Alan?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so this was a lesson I learned not in software, Gene. I learned it, believe it or not, in my college years. I was a lobby attendant in 1501 Broadway, right in Times Square. And I hated it, but the man who owned the building, and my family worked with him, he called me upstairs one day to tell me I was doing a great job running the lobby. Big deal, right? And he said, but never understand something. The mark of a good company and a well-run organization is that lowest person that you may think is not an important job does a good job. And it builds up from there. It doesn't build down necessarily. It builds up from those what you may think is a meaningless job. So I learned that lesson. I was 17 or 18.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Never forgot it.
Yeah, in fact, it's kind of the rest of the ideas really kind of flow to those things. I mean, so the third one is improvement of daily work, and that really comes from the Phoenix Project, right? The notion that more improvement than daily work is improvement of daily work. And the famous Toyota Andon Accord is really about empowering the line worker to do whatever it takes to solve problems and put in systemic fixes. And like you said, that comes from the edges, not the core. The fourth is psychological safety, and that's been explored extensively in the State of DevOps report with Dr. Nicole Forsgren and Jez Humble. But it was really interesting to revisit the pioneering work of Google in their work doing Project Oxygen, Project Aristotle, where they're trying to crack the code of what made great teams great. And at the core of it was always psychological safety, as measured by to what extent do people feel safe to share what they think without fear of ridicule or blame or castigation. And you can't have great systems or even things like the Andon core without psychological safety. And then the last one is customer focus. The notion of do functional silos, the people who lead them, do they focus on the parochial goals of the silo or really the things that are needed and the best long-term needs of the organization? And yeah, I suspect some of these things would resonate with that building owner, right, who really said it takes everybody to achieve the goal, right? And so those are the 5 things that I wanted to explore more deeply, and I thought were the themes that really came out the most strongly in development of the Unicorn Project.
Absolutely. Gene, I wanted to ask, and I'm sure other people in the audience will wonder, look, you wrote the Phoenix Project. It was an amazing success. It was an amazing eye-opener for so many people. It really was sort of the way that, it gave people a way forward into DevOps. And now DevOps Enterprise Summit and IT Revolution. You certainly have a lot on your plate. What really kind of drove you? What was pushing you to get this book done? Working on it for a long time.
I think really 2 things. I mean, one is I wanted to. The book is really inspired by the DevOps Enterprise community. It is a work I admire, and I wanted to take their achievements and write something that really, showcases and elevates what they've done. And the second one is really, and this is my own personal aspiration, is that I think for the organizations who have made it, meaning like in this age of software, the tech giants have all been nearly extinguished by technical debt. Nokia is a great example of a company who didn't make it, right, because they didn't see it in time. I think this is going to happen in every large, complex organization trying to enter the age of software. Is they need to be able to see and understand what technical debt is and how to conquer it. And technical debt is elusive. It's invisible. It gets worse over time. Right? This makes it actually very, very dangerous. Right? Left unchecked, technical debt will dominate the daily work of the entire technology organization. And these large, complex organizations, they are. Some of them are 60 years old, right? They're 6 times older than Google. They've had that much more time for technical debt to take over. So it is even that much more dangerous in these organizations. So I think to be able to, I would consider it an achievement of a lifetime if people, after reading the book, especially in the business ranks, if they could see it, identify it, and start having a more meaningful dialogue with their technology leadership about what to do about it and truly become, software companies. I mean, that would be, that's certainly one of the motivations in terms of, why we wrote the book, why it was written the way it was, and then just sort of crossing my fingers that it, has even a fraction of that effect.
Sure. So, Gene, one of the hallmarks of the Phoenix Project was you didn't have to be an ops person or a dev or a cyber, we call it cyber now, a security person to get the book, to enjoy it. It was an easy read. It was a novel. It wasn't a technical, how-to. And, in reading, I've only read manuscripts. I put pretty much final copy. Again, Unicorn Project is, again, very easy to read in that novel formula. But yet I felt this one was a little more
technical.
Aimed at a technical crowd.
Yeah. In fact, you were part of the reviewers, and you saw the open correspondence I had, especially at the end. I wrote this 12-page letter to all of the reviewers. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I described was essentially kind of doubling down and saying this is a book for developers. It's not for the highest level of technology leadership. It's not for their boss. And I think and by the way, similarly, went through a very similar decision-making process with the Phoenix Project. Is it for the CIO or is it for his or her business counterpart or their boss. And we essentially, decision made was, no, it is for technology leadership. In a similar way, we made a decision that says, you know what, this book is really aimed at developers. And the hope is that the book is so good that, you know, their leadership will read it, and maybe it will resonate well enough, you know, where it gets read by non-technologists. That was a very tough decision, but once, you know, we made it, we could double down and say, you know what, there are certain topics that I really want to get across, which is, one is functional programming, one is you know, event-driven architectures, because I think they are better tools to think with, to quote the famous French philosopher Claude Lévi-Strauss. So I think that never would have, you know, if we had said, you know, the audience of technology leadership, that never would have been in scope. But with the audience we chose, that definitely became in scope. So, you know, Alan, between you and me, crossing my fingers that people will like it, and that they'll find it accessible.
I think people will. Here, so Gene, I think also modesty, or just being in the forest or in the trees and not seeing the forest. Because you have all of these different characters who are represent different stakeholders in the organization, I think when people read these books, they tend to identify with whoever they are within that stakeholder, right? I was the security guy. But, and the same thing will happen here.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. And yeah, I think one of the things that kind of gave me the maybe courage, right, to be able to say this is going to be a more technical book is Mark Schwartz. He said, when I heard him addressing kind of the system integrator complex that, you know, surrounded him when he was when he was a CIO at U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, he said, I need technical people, because last I heard, this is still a technical field. And I remember hearing that, I'm like, good gosh, right? That's so true. And it just, I think that was, you know, probably a huge eye-popping aha moment that, you know, suggested that he just spoke a very profound truth. And so, yeah, so there's a whole bunch of fear that any author has as they sort of put out what they created into the world, and you know, you're hearing all the things that I'm sort of waiting with bated breath and nail-biting anticipation.
You know what? I'm sure it's going to be great. You mentioned that functional programming, correct?
Yep.
Another kind of primary thing in the book that I wanted to just get out there was around data.
Yeah.
And data ops is now a very big thing. To me, it's almost the primacy of data. We almost forgot that it's about the data, stupid, right? And this book tries to bring us back to that, correct?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I think, gosh, in any large, complex organization, I mean, there's decades of data about our customers, about orders, about you know, this desire to get the 360-degree view of the customer, and anyone who tries, and we all have, you know, the notions of what the products are and the product bundles and the categories, and you know, all of it is so difficult to change. And in fact, it really brings to mind so much of Heather Mickman's and Ross Clanson's initial talks from Target back in 2014. Sure. It was all about how do you get data into the hands of the teams who need it. And I'm very grateful for a bunch of people for educating me about that, including Chris Berg, CEO of Data Kitchen, from the team at John Deere, and just describe the heroic battles that are required. And I think kind of the big eye-opener for me was a statement that in any organization, probably 30 to 50% of all employees are either viewing or manipulating company data as part of the daily work, right?
It's a big number.
Yeah, so yeah, I think if you take a look at everything that LinkedIn has built over the years to enable data come to the fore, that led to the creation of Apache Kafka, you know, just the rise of things like Hadoop. I mean, it is all about this desire to use data to make better decisions and understand the customer better, and that's something that every company is going through. And my goal is to help, you know, kind of shine the light on how ill-served so many people are by the systems that are meant to get from data from here to there. By the way, one of my kind of favorite scenes in the Unicorn project is in the middle of that huge catastrophic Phoenix release. Added a new scene in the Unicorn project where in the middle of the outage during the release, Wes taps Brandon Maxine on the shoulder and says, "Oh, we got a problem. All the prices have disappeared from the e-commerce site and the mobile app, right? Due to a bad data upload, right?
Yeah,
a byte order marker, just showed up and suddenly all the prices disappeared. Yeah. So those are battles I think most of us have fought.
Yeah, we've lived it. Gene, we're almost out of time. I'd be remiss if we didn't hit on this. So much of Unicorn is, as you said, is taken from the DevOps Enterprise community, and the DevOps Enterprise Summit has become the place where this community goes to meet twice a year, right? In London and in the U.S. November 26th is the release of the book.
Yeah.
But DevOps Enterprise Summit this year is October 28th through the 30th.
Yep.
And it's in Las Vegas at the Cosmopolitan. Are there still tickets available?
There are, and there's actually a whole bunch of interesting offers around the book and the conference, and including discounts on the conference and the book bundles. And we're actually giving out, thanks to CloudBees, there will be a Unicorn Project book given out to every attendee that I'll be signing on, I think, day one. So it should be a great time, and all the Project Unicorn merch will be there as well, maybe even this awesome
cool unicorn. So, Gene, before people listening or watching this start scrambling, we're going to send an email out from you that'll have a lot of this information they could follow up on. Of course, of 100 lucky listeners today or watchers today will receive a copy of the book courtesy of DevOps.com.
Thank you so much, Alan, for making that possible. Yeah, and I'll be sending a letter to every one of you through Alan with links to where you can get excerpts of the Unicorn Project, links to every video from the DevOps Enterprise Summit 2014 to present, and a bunch of other stuff.
Great. That would be fantastic. Gene, congratulations. I know how hard you've worked over the last couple of years on this book. So congratulations. Don't have any doubts, man. It rocks. I read it. I loved it. I'm not a developer. I'm fine. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in Las Vegas.
Hey, thank you so much, Alan, and thank you all, and see you soon.
All right. Gene Kim, a best-selling author, DevOps researcher, analyst, I don't know. Just
author is good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So as I mentioned, that was from a year ago at DevOps Experience. Gene Kim talking about the Unicorn Project. And DevOps Experience will be, third annual DevOps Experience will be on October 22nd this year. Of course, Gene's DevOps Enterprise Summit is in October too. I think it's earlier in the month, the 12th or the 13th, maybe the 11th. But check that out. Of course, it's virtual this year as well. But now it's time for the news. Just a little roundup of what's going on around the media ops community. Let's give you a sense. So for today, over on DevOps.com, we have onboarding is a science, not an art. I think that's aspirational, and I'll leave it at that. Custom coding, an obstacle along the hybrid cloud journey. There's always going to be custom coding, though, so read the article and you'll get the gist of it. How centralized log management can save your company. If you're a log management company writing that, you take it with a grain of salt. Solo.io looks to standardize WebAssembly framework. Good stuff going on with Solo.io, and I've been doing some interviews with them, obviously, recently. You'll see some more. And then lastly, our friends at Tricentis have added ServiceNow support. So, they're in a large strategic relationship with SAP, now ServiceNow. Tricentis really cementing their place as the leader in enterprise testing working with the leading enterprise companies around the world. So good news from them. Over on Container Journal, we have Microsoft sets Kubernetes strategy for the enterprise. And news out of the CNCF, they published Tech Radar. It's continuing developments there. Over on Security Boulevard, we have a natural law for digital data. And if you're a natural law buff, you'll get the kind of gist of that. And then also the C-Suite report, simplified 4 key takeaways. This has been kind of a holy grail in security for many years now, right? How do we talk the language of the C-Suite and get them to understand what's important here in security? Anyway, that's the news headlines. Go check out the sites. There's so much more there. Read the articles. Get smart. Be informed. What more can we ask? For now, though, let's turn things over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor, who has an amazing interview today, as well as a great preview of some really good webinars we have in store for you this week in Media Ops.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops, and I'm here now with Mike Paler, who is VP of Product and Engineering at a company called Upwork. Hey Mike, how you doing? Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on.
Great. So your company has been fully remote for what, 3 years now?
We've been fully remote since the pandemic started in March. Prior to then, my organization was around 80% remote. So we've gone.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been mostly remote for our history. I would say we've had a sort of blended model for the last 15 plus years.
Okay. All right, great. So obviously having that model and having such a large percentage of employees working remotely, I imagine that you and the other executives at your company have really nice insight into kind of how remote work can be a successful business model for organizations. So hoping that maybe you can kind of share some of the knowledge, if you will, that you guys have gained from your few years of experience having such a diverse and remote workforce. So maybe you can kind of talk us how you guys decided to make the decision to have that particular business model, and really what how you guys have seen your company maybe transform or at least evolve over the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely. Upwork is the world's largest marketplace for on-demand talent, remote talent in particular. And so our business model sort of necessitates the adoption of that. Mm-hmm. And that's been a really interesting journey for the last 15 plus years. And we've learned a lot over the course of that time. And in particular, the engineering department is mostly distributed. There are other functions at the company that are the same way. My team happens to be, let's say, 300 to 400 people, and we were traditionally 80% remote. We're now 100% remote, and it's been a fantastic, way to build an engineering and product organization. I think that we've got some learnings pre-COVID. I would say some things during the pandemic and since then have, forced us to adjust a little bit as we went to 100% remote. Although largely, it's been the same. I think communication tools have sort of ramped up for us, in particular. For our local employees in the United States or in other locations, there's just been an increased need to remain collaborative with each other, even beyond what we were doing pre-COVID. So with no offices at all and no ability to actually see someone or one of your colleagues at, sort of routine times, I think that's brought about some enhanced, dependence on communication and collaboration tools in particular. So we like to say that working remotely is one thing. Working during a pandemic is another thing entirely. So I think our playbook adjusted a little bit, in the March timeframe.
Yeah. I think that you can say that about pretty much every company out there right now. So for companies that really hadn't adopted a remote work philosophy even. It seems like, obviously they were the ones who were kind of hit hardest by all of this. They didn't make the transition as seamlessly as organizations that had adopted a remote work, whether it be a philosophy or just kind of rules of engagement, if you will. So what do you see, just kind of in general, would be the biggest roadblock for organizations that all of a sudden had to kind of adopt this work from home, new paradigm for them? I imagine there were many for some organizations that always had every employee in the office. But what do you see as some of the bigger ones?
I think the bigger ones tend to be the ability to work as sort of smaller units. I think, we're used to running into each other in the office, having one-on-one conversations in the hallway. Mm-hmm. So I think the ability to interact one-on-one is super important. And I think the ability to work relatively asynchronously, collaboration in documents, on projects needs to be a little bit more flexible. Like I said, working remotely is one thing, but we're not all 40 hours the same hours, so to speak. And I think that, knowing your colleague might be somewhere else in the world or might be dealing with a situation with their family or other at that time means you sort of have to adopt to a bit of an asynchronous model where we collaborate, but it's not necessarily in the same room at the same time or even on a video call at the same time. Mm-hmm. Video meeting fatigue is real. And I think that, we've managed to adapt our processes a little bit to be more collaborative, but not necessarily all at once. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that I think, really have to live through to understand that. The other is probably the decentralized decision-making. I do believe that organizations would be better off with a little bit of decentralized decision-making and autonomy. In particular, like in my engineering organization, what I really like is we have microservices, we have, independent, operations between different Scrum teams, but we really enable teams to get together on their own and run their services and run their business as they see fit. And, that's a little bit different when there's no central home office or central decision-making authority in any one particular location. And I think that's been a bit of a breath of fresh air in some ways, because everybody's remote and it's a bit of a leveling exercise. We're all sort of working from our own location, and it helps us think through how do we make decisions? How do we, meet and decide on things? How do we operate our independent services and our independent lines of business, but make it all come together seamlessly in the end for a service. So it's been a really interesting journey. But I think those are some of the bigger ones that somebody might see. Beyond infrastructure capabilities, VPN issues, last mile bottlenecks. These are things we're all suffering through because our cable service providers, ISPs weren't ready, things like that.
Right.
Once you get through the sort of foundational elements, your laptop's secure, you're ready. There's a sort of collaboration and actual working dynamics that are, people are adopting to.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there when we're talking about the way people are working these days. I think that a lot of people have completely transformed the way that they work and their mindset attached to work. Because I think there were so many people who kind of, lived in this box, if you will, of working, getting to an office at 9 o'clock in the morning and then leaving at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And that was work for them. And they would check emails at night or whatever, but there wasn't any maybe, thinking about work going on beyond that. And I think now that folks are kind of living and working in the same space, they're blending that a little bit more, and they're thinking about work at different times, and so maybe they're being more collaborative at different times, and they're just more productive in how they, what they're thinking about and how they're going about doing their job. Is that something that you guys see with your remote workforce? I mean, are you seeing like ideas being generated at, say 10 o'clock at night and people are throwing emails around, or are people still kind of in that box, that 9 to 5 box, if you know what I mean?
we run a global organization. I think there are, in my team in particular, there are around 35 different, smaller teams, and we've been, we've been almost nearly fully remote for a long time. So, yes, people are working at various hours. I think with the lack of commute, and the lack of sort of boundaries between home and work life, it has made people more productive, and it has changed the way in which they think about their day. So I think if you adopt a sort of global team concept of remote talent, for example, you've been sort of used to the fact that different people in different time zones contributing at all hours of the day. And that's something you get used to over time as well. And in particular, if you were a relatively localized company, you'll start to see that people's schedules are a little bit different. So within a relative window, you'll see people contributing at different hours and at different paces. So they're setting their own schedule. You'll get a flurry of activities. A memo gets written or a number of comments or something like that. And you're like, oh, great. I didn't know they were going to be able to, work on that then, but this is, a flood of activity comes in. So I do think you're seeing higher productivity. Again, the downside there could be a little bit of burnout and a little bit of fatigue. We need to handle this, as leaders, just to help encourage people to set more firm boundaries so that the expectation isn't, complete 24/7 working cycle. So yeah, we've seen it. And, I think we've seen it for a long time. And it's one of the reasons why we promote sort of remote talent. And that's the mission of our company. You do get enhanced, productivity in general. I think in particular in engineering, we get sort of worldwide coverage from site reliability teams and things like that, which is just great. It means we have a flexible environment. We can work at any hour of the day that's most fitting to our schedule. And it doesn't matter if you're working at night or in the day. It's a around the clock operation.
That's great. I mean, I'm not advocating having to work 24 hours a day, but I do believe that inspiration comes at any time. It doesn't necessarily come during the workday. You could have a great idea at midnight, and I think so many people kind of train themselves to not be inspired after work hours. But it's really kind of interesting to see, some of the conversations that are being had these days that, I believe are really more kind of inclusive with other people in the organization as well, who, because there aren't the boundaries between departments and between offices and things like that, I think more a larger and more diverse group of people are being pulled into projects and working together collaboratively in a way that maybe that didn't happen before the pandemic when everybody was in an office. Are you seeing something like that? I mean, obviously you wouldn't, because you guys are fully remote, but in your conversations with some of your clients, maybe are they having are they seeing those types of things?
They are. I think diversity of everything brings innovation to life, and if looking at different people's situations and working locations, you can reach out and get talent across the globe. I think that it enables so many more avenues toward, diverse thinking and innovation. If you're working on a service or a product, it's been a huge advantage to have a global team, in my opinion, not just because we can work, at different cycles and times, but because we bring different unique perspectives, to the development of a product or, whatever kind of project we're working on. So I do think that collaboration tools in general have increased the pathways of communication amongst teams. I'm not blocked to speak to anyone in the company in any way. We don't have that type of culture, but I do think it's made it extremely easy to say, I'm struggling with something, can we chat here for a second? And it's just easier to engage someone to get the right level of like mindset or thinking or experience that they've had right into your project or right into your sort of like mental state. So I think that collaboration tools have always made that easier. Now we're just relying on them more. And there are really distinct advantages there, like a micro communication is easy. And even for managers and employees, thinking about like one-on-ones and check-ins, like, how are you feeling? Like, these things can be like, quicker and easier to sort of gauge rather than sort of formal set meetings. So I do think that's provided flexibility, and there's a number of benefits for the organization.
Right. And you know, another thing that I've actually in other conversations with folks, one of the things that's constantly come up is as a manager, if you're working with a newly remote workforce, you kind of have to practice what you preach. You know, if you tell people to set parameters, don't work after 8 o'clock, or don't, you know, just try to have some downtime, take some time off, focus on your family, whatever. Don't say these things and then not do it yourself. You know, you really kind of have to practice what you preach, you know, and not set any rules that you yourself won't follow. Organizations, sometimes I think managers don't really kind of understand that, or they don't maybe consider it when they're talking to their employees.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I try to make it a habit with my team in particular to let them know when I'm taking some time off. And along the same lines, I think we don't know each other's situation on any given time of the day. So I think it's important to use the variety of email collaboration tools to sort of set your in and out of the office status. Like, you know, really communicate with people about what's going on in your world. Make sure people understand I'm actually on PTO, even though, you know, my status shows up here. Those are important things, because just because you're at home doesn't mean you're working, and just because you're somewhere else, not your home, doesn't mean you're not working. And I think that those things have suddenly become unclear. And I think we have to use the tools at our disposal to be like communicating with our team, saying, yeah, I'm on PTO. You know, here's the coverage plan, and here's how I'm going to show up in statuses. So I think those are tricks you can do. And I do think, just as a manager, setting the expectations that, you know, paid time off and leave is super important. It really helps your mental mindset, and it helps to sort of reset. And we are spending more time each individual day, I believe, with the lack of commute and other sort of challenges working. So I think it's important to set those boundaries as well.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Mike, thank you so much for taking a couple minutes and talking with me about your organization, what you guys are seeing with the remote workspace. It'll be interesting to see how the next 6 months go as companies open and shut down again, and you know, we'll see what happens. But thanks again. I do appreciate your time and your expertise.
No problem. Thank you again for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right, great. Okay, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned. Hey guys, happy Monday, and welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops, and I'm here with the Monday edition of the Webinars Preview. We have an especially busy week of webinars here at DevOps.com and Security Boulevard, so I wanted to give you just a touch of information about some of the ones that we have coming up very quickly. The first one I want to let you know about is called Kubernetes, What to Monitor and When. This one is happening Tuesday, September 15th at 3 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It's sponsored by Fairwinds. And this one is all about Kubernetes and monitoring Kubernetes challenges, what to monitor, how to monitor cluster workloads, what tools you can use to help, including the open source tools, pretty much anything you need to know related to Kubernetes and monitoring. So please feel free to check this one out. Again, this is Tuesday, September 15th, 3 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. The second one I want to highlight today is called All the Ops, Data Ops with GitOps for streaming data on Kafka and Kubernetes. This one is happening Wednesday, September 16th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It's sponsored by Lenses.io. And in this webinar, they're going to cover
many different things, including enhancing the productivity of Kafka and Kubernetes, a stream with DevOps, enabling enterprise adoption and scaling, and how to govern and secure your stream. Good stuff for the Kafka Kubernetes cloud, definitely worth checking out. The webinar, third webinar today, I want to let you know about, is happening Wednesday also at September 16th at 1 p.m. Eastern. This one is sponsored by Shift Left, and it's called Dev-Friendly Security Build Rules for Every Pull Request. Again, I said this one is sponsored by Shift Left. In a nutshell, this webinar is going to offer up a developer-friendly model to insert security build rules into Git-based workflows. Going to focus on the growing divide between application security and application development, and why security build rules are so important to bridge that gap. This is definitely one to check out if you're having any DevSecOps issues, even thinking about DevSecOps deeper, want to maybe insert security earlier into your development pipeline. So definitely check this one out. Good stuff. Plus, there's going to be a demo. Yay! So, all right, that's all that I have for today's edition of the webinar previews. Come on back tomorrow. I'll have more for you. Until then, please stay safe.
All right. Thanks, Charlene. Great preview and great interview with Mike Paylor, VP of Product and Engineering at Upwork. Now it's time for our channel roundup with the one and only Mike Vizard. I mentioned at the top of the show, Mike's guest this week, or in this episode, is German Berlo of ServiceNow. And German is the Senior Director of Product Management for ServiceNow. And we're going to talk about reining in the cloud costs, or reining in cloud costs, which is, for some organizations, the move to cloud transformation has kind of gotten cloud costs out of control. Anyway, here's Mike Vizard with German Berlo of ServiceNow.
This is Digital Anarchist.
All right, thanks, guys. From the studio, we're here with Herman Burdot, who is the Senior Director of Product Management for ServiceNow, and we're talking about the cloud and costs. It seems to me, at least, that there's a lot more focus on this area in the wake of the pandemic and the economic downturn. Herman, what are you hearing from customers? What are the challenges? And are people trying to rein these costs in now more than ever? It seems like maybe folks were spending like drunken sailors in the cloud, and now they care a lot more. So what's going on?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Nice joining you, and thank you for having me. You're absolutely right. With this new environment, people are reacting in the best way they can. And a lot of that has to do with allowing people to use the cloud more than they used to. We know from recent research that cloud spend has ballooned in Q2 of the year, and that trend is only continuing. Just to give you a perspective, overall, we are seeing in the market that there are $34.6 billion spent on cloud services, and that's an increase of over 30% compared to last year and 11% compared to Q1. So certainly people are leveraging the cloud a lot more and drawing those services just to make sure that they continue to produce, even in this new environment where people are working from home. The show must go on. So it's a trend that will continue as we go forward here.
Do you think the increase in cloud spending is on custom applications? Is this DevOps teams that are spending this, or is it lifting and shifting of traditional monolithic applications by the internal IT team, or what's driving this right now?
It's a combination of all those factors, frankly. A lot of that is shifting workloads to the cloud, to the public clouds. Things that used to be run in the data centers on premises are being moved to AWS, Azure, and other cloud providers. So that drives a lot of the cost. But it's not only infrastructure or platform as a service. On the SaaS applications as well, people are looking for ways to collaborate in this decentralized environment, and they are connecting more and more SaaS applications into their environments, and that's driving significant cost. We are seeing that from our customers, and it's not just the big players that everyone knows about. I mean, it's not Zoom or Salesforce only. There are a lot of niche players that are bringing new functionality to specific industries, and that drives the cost as well. So it's all over the place, frankly.
How do I find all these things? I think what's happened in the wake of the pandemic is business execs were basically charged with maintaining the business in any way possible. So they rolled out different apps. They probably moved workloads. And I'm not sure IT guys had a lot of insight into what was going on all the time. So how do I discover what's been done, what's up there, who's using what, and then ultimately try to figure out how to maybe consolidate some of that spending?
Yeah, so these VPs of IT operations are in charge of controlling the cost, right? Although the spend is ballooning, they have a budget that they need to manage, and they are using all the tools at their disposal to make sure that they have that spend under control. And what we do at ServiceNow is we let people analyze the costs across all the different cloud infrastructure, SaaS platform, using a set of tools that is in a single platform. It is all coming together to a single pane of glass. In some cases, IT is sanctioning the spend, so they have visibility into where that money is going. But the nature of the cloud makes it very, very easy for individual business units to contract their own services, right? And that goes outside of the typical IT budget. So we have tools in our application to help people analyze expense reports, credit card statements, looking for ways to identify how the businesses are spending dollars on cloud services. So through machine learning algorithms, we analyze thousands, millions of transactions and identify which ones of those are related to a cloud spend. And once we have that data identified, we help customers classify, right, what type of spend it is. So we are using Zoom for this recording. You know, this would be one category of video conferencing, but there are many services that do the same type of service. So many applications provide the same type of service. So we help people understand within a given category all the services that they are contracting. And if they look at that, they will probably see that they have multiple applications delivering the same function. And as a result, there's an opportunity for them to consolidate the spend, rationalize the number of applications that they need to support. And the end result is really savings. That's really what we are going after, identifying where the cloud spend is going and what are the things that we can do to help them optimize that spend so the budget is under control.
Can I do that in real time? Can I apply policies, or am I analyzing the reports after the fact and then I'm trying to maybe craft a policy that I tell people, but how do I enforce it?
That's a very, very good question, actually. We provide ways to define those policies, right? Let's take an example on spend that is done on an infrastructure as a service cloud provider. We have policies for companies to ensure that, for example, the VMs or the machine, the compute power that developers are using during business hours are shut down when they are out of work, right? When they are sleeping. So we don't pay for that additional compute power that no one's really utilizing. And the way we do it is we let companies define their policies up front, and we automatically enforce them. So there's no manual intervention here. The application is taking care of all that enforcement behind the scenes. And we do that through our Cloud Insights product, which is part of the ServiceNow product suite.
Do you think people will get to the point where they're comparing costs between clouds and deciding what workloads go where based on cost as a factor? I imagine performance and compliance and other things are part of that equation, but how interactive can I get in terms of thinking about which cloud to use proactively or before I even deploy the workload?
Yeah, so that's a typical scenario that customers go through, right? So the evaluation of, hey, do I really benefit by moving the workload to the cloud? And if so, which cloud do I pick? And there are different techniques and different approaches to doing that evaluation. And, looking at the type of workload that it is it a production workload? Is it DevOps type environment, what you are trying to do dictates what the best strategy is. And people really look at cost, look at what kind of availability they need, what are the teams, where are the teams. As you know, the cost of cloud computing power is regional as well. So, there are a number of different variables that we analyze to help customers with those decisions, certainly. But I think one of the key elements here is the importance of having all these tools in a single platform, because that allows you to understand not only the cost, but also what are the bigger implications of managing that cost. You may know that there's, for example, you're running some database in AWS or Azure, but understanding the business context of that database is very important. And that's something that we do very effectively in ServiceNow, understanding that database running on Azure is actually supporting your CRM application, and having full visibility into the entire stack is key. So you can decide where there are the saving opportunities make sense, and where you need additional compute power and so on. Right sizing the VMs is also another way to optimize your spend. So very critical to understand the full business context of the infrastructure as a service that you are contracting.
A lot of people, of course, always had an ITSM tool that they had on premise. And in the wake of the pandemic, I think people are starting to realize they may need to move that into the cloud. But the other side of this equation is I really can't collect all the data I need to optimize the IT environment unless I have some sort of massive cloud system, because you're collecting data from all your customers to come up with these optimizations, right? As far as I understand it. And that's much more than I'm ever going to be able to do by myself with a single platform residing on my local server, right?
That's right. So when we look at optimization, we look at how we can help a given customer optimize their spend. Everyone has a different configuration, frankly, but what we can do is we can help people understand how their peers are using their data and managing their services, and provide them kind of like a workbench type measurement. So we can do that with our IT service management solution, looking at how we resolve incidents and time to resolution and things like that. So we do have the single platform, and we run all our customers in our data centers. But when we look at specific optimization scenarios, we are trying to optimize for the spend that is specific to that one customer. The playbooks are typically the same, right? It's the same type of rationale used across the board, but the specifics are particular to any given customer.
Do you think DevOps teams are going to be held more accountable for spending? It seems to me, at least, that they've been at the forefront of driving workloads to the cloud. So the question becomes, will they be getting reports from centralized IT that allow them to maybe do things in a more proactive fashion, to see things as they're happening in near real time? And ultimately, are we going to bridge the divide between DevOps and these IT service guys, because they all have common vested interest now in cost?
Absolutely. That's a key area for us as we continue to invest in our DevOps solutions, and we continue to bring that information into the overall ServiceNow suite. You can think about change management in the days of DevOps that needs to happen at a much faster speed with a lot more automation behind the scenes. And that's just an example. But the other thing that you can think about is, as DevOps teams constantly bring up and down servers to do their testing, their development, and so on. Back to the policy conversation we were having a few minutes ago, that's where we play a role too. Understanding how, what type of workload they're trying to deploy, and right-sizing those VMs to support the workload that they are trying to run is key. And our policy engine is the sentinel that is monitoring that, and will help customers in what we call our software factory, will help the customers to deploy at the right size, and therefore optimizing their spend.
Do you think finance is going to get a lot more involved in this equation, or are they just going to still set budget, or will they be more proactive in their conversations with DevOps teams and the rest of IT?
Well, I think the budget cycle is always going to be a component, right? People need to have an idea on how the company is going to perform and what is the money available for discretionary spend. So that's always to be a component. But many of these DevOps teams operate in business units that are revenue generating. So they have a lot more discretionary spend than in other environments. So I suspect that they will have autonomy and they will be able to make decisions that are best for whatever product they are trying to bring to market, because essentially some of those products become the products of the company itself. So while cost is going to continue to be a key measurement and something to be in control of, I think the DevOps teams will have a little bit more leeway than the traditional organization.
All right. So if you're the one in charge of IT, what would you be doing right now? What would be your primary area of focus as it relates to cost?
As it relates to cost, it will be monitoring how we are spending money and making sure that every dollar brings the desired outcome to the organization. It will be monitoring how we are spending money in cloud infrastructure. There's a big promise of migrating from on-premises CapEx type of spending to cloud and converting into OpEx. Making sure that promise is actually fulfilled is key for IT leaders. And it's not only on the infrastructure side, it's also as people contract and sign more and more SaaS agreements to support their businesses, making sure that that people that are subscribed and that they have a paid license actually take advantage of that license. If they are not really using it, being quick to inactivate the account so we are not really wasting money. That's, we are seeing with our customers that in a typical organization, that's a big source of spend that goes to waste. Initially people think that everyone is going to need a license, but realistically, when people start interacting with the applications, many of those never even get to those services. So why pay for something that no one's using it? Getting the right tools to monitor usage and optimize the spend is key. And it's going to continue to be key because the number of SaaS applications that companies are using is ballooning. And it's very, very difficult to stay on top of everything unless you have the right tools that are helping you. So those will be the two areas that I will look into.
Yeah, I'd be a little scared to find out how much money I'm spending on stuff that I'm not using, but I suppose folks got to find out sometime.
Yeah, we all go through that, and as you can relate in your personal life, the companies are not very different, and we find lots of wasted spend all over the place. It's very easy to contract a new cloud service. It is hard to get unsubscribe or break the contract. So staying on top of it and monitoring usage is a key component of proper and good cost management.
All right. It's just like me, my wallet, and my kids. They subscribe to all kinds of services, and I have no idea what I'm paying for half the time.
I hear you. Yeah.
All right. Herman, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. Best of luck, and back to you guys in the studio.
We're going to head things over now, though, to the Analyst Corner with Mitch. It's Mitchell Ashley, CEO, founder of Accelerated Strategies Group. And Mitchell's talking today about real-time systems and data analytics in a specialty domain, and that is critical for a strategic area for many businesses. It's the importance of real-time streaming analytics. And Mitchell's conversation is with William Bill Bain, CEO of Scale Out.
Welcome to Analyst Corner. Mitch Ashley, CEO with Accelerated Strategies Group. I have a really fascinating conversation coming up in our next video segment that I want to do a little bit of a lead into. Now, occasionally, I've been around for a while and working in a lot of different parts of IT and technology and our world. But of course, there's many areas I also haven't spent much time. And one of those is in real-time systems. Just not something that I have a great deal of expertise in, nor my career led me into much at all. So it's always fascinating for me to learn in a domain that I don't have a lot of experience in, or certainly have a lot of gaps in. And maybe that's the most important thing to recognize when you don't know something. And, I always consider that. And when I don't know the answer, that means I probably have an opportunity to learn something. So I certainly learned a lot from this conversation. Now, the guest that I have today, his name is Dr. William Baines. He's CEO of Scale Out Software. He goes by Bill in our conversation. He'd reached out to talk with me about some interesting things our company is doing. And they have something going on sort of in the COVID world, but that's not really their main focus. Bill's background is that he came out of the Intel supercomputing group, went to Microsoft, and has been working on this distributed caching, in-memory data storage and processing for very large real-time systems. So imagine whether it's sensors at a toll booth or IoT sensors for that matter in a home, could be security applications, could be a health application like a COVID, contact tracing kind of situation. But he's really been working on this problem for quite a while. Bill is what I would call a true data scientist or computer scientist, really, very involved in the science and art of it, but the advancement of it. And so super interesting person to talk to. And I really enjoyed our conversation today. He brings us into this world of something called real-time streaming analytics. So imagine doing analytics. Now, this is not post facto, let me go look at the data that's, kind of data exhaust that's thrown off from a real-time system. This is looking at what's happening now and then doing that in some intelligent way where you can make sense of it. I mean, in a large real-time system, things are happening, of course, at such a rate. No human can do much with that large amount of data, just on an exception or on an individual basis. So his company has developed some really interesting technology, and he introduced me to the topic. I wasn't familiar with it, of something called digital twins. So his technology is around real-time streaming analytics with digital twins. Now, that wasn't a familiar concept to me. He discusses some of the origins of it. And it's just very interesting. And we talk about some different applications of it. I was really fascinated by his thoughts on, what does the world look like when we have so much, take where we are today. And it's just that the rate of advancement, the rate of accumulation, the rate of capture of all this information, real-time information, where are we going to be in the future? How are we going to operate in a world with so much data so fast in the moment? No one can deal with it, even with really good analytics. And he introduced the thought of what analytics can do in that kind of environment is simplify some of the complexity. And I thought that was an interesting paradigm because there's so much of oftentimes what we do in the technology world is really, there's a lot of complexity in it, but ultimately it's about delivering an extremely good customer experience. Well, anything that's looks simple is probably really hard. That's been my experience. That great user experience that happens in an app or on a web application, whatever it might be. The effort that goes into that is phenomenal. It's sometimes staggering how hard it is to make something simple and really usable. And in a world where we could easily today get overrun by the volumes, quantity, the analysis, the meaning, the integrating it with third-party or external data to provide context. So much of that we couldn't do ourselves in real time. And as you just layer more and more of that on top of it, Bill's point, I think, in the discussion was how that can help us bring some understanding to that increasing complexity. So I want to turn it over to the video with Bill, and I love your thoughts on it. If you want to reach out to me and share your thoughts and ideas, you can always reach me at mitchell@accelst.com, and enjoy. I think you'll find it insightful.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
This is Digital Anarchist.
I'm joined by Bill Bain, who is CEO of Scale Out Software, talking about a really interesting topic I know a little bit of and some I don't know about. So first, before we get to that, welcome, Bill. Good to be talking with you.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity.
You bet. Now, Scale Out Software is in Bellevue. I guess you have locations in Beaverton, maybe an office in Denver, not too far from me. You've been around since 2003. Does that sound right?
Yeah, been around a long time. I came out of Microsoft and started this company in Bellevue, right next door to Microsoft in Redmond. And we've been developing software and had products on the market since 2005.
Okay, great. Now, I think you started in the distributed caching, kind of in-memory data storage, that part of the business of the industry?
That's right. Yes, back in 2005, there was no, believe it or not, there was no really good distributed caching solution for the .NET world, for the Microsoft world. There were some Java products. And so we filled that gap by introducing a product for .NET and also another for Java. And that product has been in constant use since 2005. Some really large companies use it for holding things like airline reservations and shopping carts for e-commerce sites and a variety of other uses.
Yeah, I would imagine applications that are very high volume, don't have time for disk I/O, that kind of thing, are prime candidates for this kind of technology.
Exactly, right. Yes. In fact, because it can scale so transparently by just adding servers, commodity servers, it can handle really large workloads without having the response time get longer and longer. And that's what you really need, say, for a big e-commerce site. You want to make sure that customers and shoppers always have very fast response times. And the same applies in other areas like financial services and airlines and logistics and many other applications.
I'm sure you've evolved this into the cloud world, into Azure, maybe other environments. What's different about the cloud world when you're talking about distributed caching or in-memory kind of analytics?
Well, we haven't introduced our product in a bit more challenging for a variety of reasons. But what we have done is introduce a streaming analytics service for Microsoft Azure, and that runs so that all you have to do is connect to their IoT hub or to other sources and receive incoming messages and telemetry from devices, and we can analyze that with our in-memory data grid behind the scenes, and then provide analytics, feedback, and also visualization all built into one product.
Okay, interesting. So kind of give us the flow. You're talking about, in-memory shopping carts and applications that have in-memory data. That's feeding into an analytics engine. That's all happening in real time. So you're feeding this into an analytics engine of which you've configured to answer or provide data about some particular questions or algorithms. Correct? Am I following?
Right. So distributed caching is really sort of the underpinning of an in-memory computing system because it provides you in-memory data storage. And what it's doing is hosting millions, thousands, or millions of objects, software objects in memory, and distributing them transparently across a grid which is just really a cluster of commodity servers or virtual servers in the cloud. And that gives you very fast data storage and high availability through data replication and there are many other technologies under the floor that are employed. For example, peer-to-peer membership, and we could go on and on, have a whole computer science discussion. But on top of that, then what you want to be able to do is two things. One is data parallel computing. So you can look at all those objects at once and extract value from what's in them. So if it's shopping carts, for example, you might want to know what are the most popular products selling this hour. Maybe I want to do a flash sale. Maybe I want to put a product on, on a special, give it a special price. Maybe I want to identify particular users or shoppers and make them special sales based on their shopping history. And so what happens is data parallel computing lets you see the big picture, gives you what we call situational awareness about the state of your live operational system. And then the next step after that is to incorporate stream processing so you can focus on each individual data source, whether it's an e-commerce shopper or an airline traveler or a person doing a banking transaction or a person wearing a smart watch and sending telemetry to the cloud. You want to be able to look at each individual data source and try to understand what the incoming messages and telemetry are telling you so that you can respond in a focused way to each individual data source, in addition to doing aggregate analytics across all of them. That's a lot to take in at once, but that's what in-memory computing lets you do.
It is, and then what I'm thinking about is at very high volumes, how do you respond to something that's happening that quickly, maybe across a large grid of kind of data sources? I mean, how do you do that, or do you have to do that at a more macro level?
Well, that's a great question, because typically what you find in streaming analytics is that the software platforms tend to look at the incoming data at a macro level. They look at typically as a pipeline or a stream of incoming messages from all the data sources, and they look into that stream to try to extract value. So for example, if it's a stock prices flowing by, you want to see which companies are having their stock is going up quickly, or which ones are taking a dive, and be able to then signal somebody to make a stock trade. That's an example. Or if you're looking at cars flowing through tolling booths on a highway system, you want to see where is the congestion starting to occur? Where, what do we need to do? Maybe we need more employees at a given tolling site. Those are just some examples. But what you really, really want to do is be able to handle each data source independently, ideally, so that you can keep information about that data source that allows you to understand what the telemetry from it is saying. So in the case of the stock trading, if, say, pick your favorite high-tech, company that's stock price is going up, you want to know, well, why is it going up? What is in the news today? What's happening to the executive personnel? Is somebody being hired that is a luminary, or is somebody being fired? So you'd want to be able to make a stock trading decision based on some insights you have about that stock, not just what the stock price is doing. And that would apply for healthcare tracking too. If you're looking at telemetry from a smartwatch and it's telling you blood pressure and blood oxygen and heart rate, you want to know, well, what does that mean for me versus say for you in terms of my medical history and current medications and activity. So being able to give focused feedback or take focused action for each data source, that's a big challenge that streaming analytics has not really handled very well until now. And so we have introduced a new technology to address that challenge.
Okay. Well, I'd love to hear more about that. One of the things I took, though, from what you said is it's not just the streaming data and the analytics of that. It's matching up to third-party or external sources to put context or more meaning around what that data is bringing to you. Is that correct?
Yes, you're actually pulling in data from the outside, and that's these cloud services like Microsoft Azure have hubs for allowing you to pull in telemetry, and then also called IoT Hub, and lets you pull in messages from data sources. You also can just go directly extract data from databases and other third-party sources that allow you to enrich your understanding of what the telemetry is telling you. Mm-hmm. The problem with all of this is there's no good software model for managing it, and it can be intractable if you just sit down with pencil and paper and try to cobble together a solution using typical approaches with databases, web services, data lakes, and so forth. That gets very complicated fast. To give you an example, suppose you're tracking a fleet of trucks and you want to track each truck and you want to know things like, has that driver driven too long? Is that driver driving erratically? Does the driver appear to be lost? Is that engine telemetry telling me there's going to be a problem occurring, or is it just normal for that particular truck? So you want to be able to do that, say, for 7,000 trucks, and do it simultaneously and respond within a few seconds. That's where the software modeling techniques we use in typical streaming analytics, and I'm talking about open source technologies like Apache Storm and Flink and Beam, they are challenged in solving that particular problem. And so what we have done is apply a new approach called digital twins, which have been around for a long time, but not been applied to this problem. We're applying that to this problem in order to allow you to have this ability to track individual data sources and respond in milliseconds to them.
Now, digital twins is not a term I was familiar with. Tell us a little bit about what that means. I think you said it comes out of the manufacturing world, correct?
Yeah, it comes out of a technology area called product lifecycle management, PLM, and it's been popularized for simulation and for modeling devices that are put out in the field and then tracked to see how they're actually performing, like motors and valves and so forth. So it's used heavily in IoT. People typically think of digital twins as being used in simulation, although it is also used in managing, as I said, the life cycle of a device. So you can see whether or not it's performing up to spec and whether the next generation needs to be improved. Now, more recently, digital twins has been applied to things, business process modeling. So, for example, using digital twins to model light switches and doors and in buildings and actually the floors and the rooms in a hierarchical manner, so that you can have a model of an office building and know in an instant which light switches are on and how to turn them off, and use a digital twin approach to that in a hierarchy. But applying it to streaming analytics, where you're looking at incoming telemetry and trying to respond quickly, that's a challenge that we're applying digital twins to. And so we put this prefix, real-time digital twins, to describe them as somewhat different than the traditional use case.
So talk to us a little bit more about, I want to go into more depth about what is it about real-time data, real-time analytics, and doing digital twins? Why is that a particular hard challenge that hadn't really been solved up to this point?
Well, if you think about how do you write software that's going to track the state of thousands, maybe 1 million data sources. And so, we've just done this demonstration application of contact tracing, which we could talk more about how digital twins can help solve that problem. The challenge you have is you need to maintain state information for every data source. Okay. And typical streaming platforms don't have a first-class mechanism for doing that. They leave it to the application to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, they don't touch state at all. That's part of how they handle such high volumes.
Right. They just watch. They typically are thinking in terms of either a directed graph or a pipeline, or just a straight-in pipeline of messages in which you look into and extract value. And often what you're really doing using the so-called Lambda model of stream processing is you're doing a very limited amount of work in real time, and you're really just filtering data out and pushing other data into a data lake, so that offline in a data lake, you can analyze it with tools like Spark to find the big picture trends using, the aggregate analytics, the operators like MapReduce in the data lake. So people typically punt on the problem of doing aggregate analytics in real time. And they also don't have the tools to track the state of every individual data source and couple that state with the telemetry as it comes in. And if you think about it, that's where in-memory computing has a particular strength, because it's storing all of these objects in memory and it has transparent scalability. If you can just get messages to the objects, you can very easily find the state about a data source that you need to analyze that incoming message. And so that's what gives rise to using a digital twin approach, because a digital twin all it does is allow you to associate state with incoming messages from that data source, and it allows an application developer to write a little piece of code that says, oh, I have access to this state, I have a message, I will now analyze in some domain-specific way what's going on and send alerts, go write to a database or read a database, do whatever I have to do in a standard language like Java or C#. So it's a very nice, simple, well-understood object-oriented approach to solving that problem.
Interesting. I'm curious too, is that kind of maintaining that information about state, does that mean you're only aware of what the current state is? You're not maintaining any history of it? And that's for a more traditional data storage source?
Well, that's a great question. And the answer is no. In fact, the object, which corresponds to that data source, maintains the state that's needed to do introspection, so it can look back. It can keep time-windowed lists of incoming messages, Or typically what an application will do is filter the direct incoming messages and create its own list of messages that represent significant events that have occurred. So for example, if you're watching temperature coming from a wind turbine, temperature in the turbine itself, say the oil temperature, and this is not actually done. People, I have learned, do this on site. It's done with edge computing. But just to give you the picture here, if we're looking at temperature fluctuations, then you would say, well, I don't really care as long as it's in the normal range and it's not changing plus or minus. But if I start to see an excursion upwards, that's an event. I'll record that event in a time ordered list. And then if that occurs again, I'll say maybe there's a pattern here. So you can write a predictive analytics algorithm for that device by recording a history of what you consider significant. Now, at some point you say, well, I want to keep I want to keep an archive of all these events that I've recorded. So the digital twin code can just push stuff out to a time series database or to a standard database or a blob store. There's no constraint on what it can do in terms of accessing external stores. Mm-hmm. But in terms of what's kept in memory, it's the state that's relevant to doing the analytics you're trying to accomplish.
That was part of why I asked that question, because it seemed like managing multiple states of state could be a real challenge in terms of consuming memory. But you talked about how that could be then pushed off into more traditional data storage.
Right.
Interesting. So I'm curious, you mentioned this demonstration application. Tell us more about that.
Okay, yeah, sure. So we started looking at the use of real-time digital twins for contact tracing. And what we recognize is that it's, the solutions that are out for the public to use are difficult. They're complex. I just saw a news story yesterday about how using people to do contact tracing is highly frustrating because people won't answer the phone. They won't. And when they do answer the phone, they won't tell you what you need to know about who they've been seeing because so there are all these problems with.
Yeah, in the world of HIPAA, let's share our contract tracing information with you, right?
Right. And then when you look at these Bluetooth-oriented, apps for mobile devices, well, they have their challenges because people worried about their privacy. Mm-hmm. However, if you think about companies, they have a kind of a narrower problem because you have a restricted population, which is already broken up into departments and groups, and you understand which employees tend to interact heavily, and you also will know when employees go interact with other groups. And so you can actually model these interactions using digital twins, where you have one digital twin per employee. And in that digital twin, you keep track of all of the contacts that were made within a reasonable period of time, like 2 weeks. So that if, in fact, any one employee tests positive, you can immediately traverse the network of intermediate contacts and find all of the employees who could potentially have been affected and notify them immediately within a few seconds. And at the same time, you can do aggregate analytics to see what's going on and whether, you've got a problem in a particular state, in a particular department that you need to go address.
Mm-hmm. So that means, you can imagine certainly people coming in and out of a building, but also if you're doing geo-tracking, geo-fencing, things like that, now you really could potentially say these two people were within proximity of each other for this period of time.
Yeah, you can do that. What we have demonstrated is something simpler. We wrote a mobile app and let it connect into a digital twin. So an employee would be in this, hypothetical usage. This is a demonstration app, as I mentioned. But the mobile app, which is fully functional, will let an employee notify when that employee, say, goes to a meeting in another group. So automatically, the digital twin, the first thing it does for that employee is ingest the group members from the employee database. That's a case of going out to a corporate database. And so it knows, okay, if this person is going to work, then they're going to interact with the 10 or 12 people in their group. And if any one of them gets COVID or tests positive, then all of them need to be isolated. That's a given. So that can be fully automated. The second thing is, though, the employee can say, okay, I just met with Joe over in that department somewhere else, maybe a different site, and that will be pushed to the digital twin and kept as a record. So that for 2 weeks, if anybody that Joe interacts with or that is tested positive, then this employee will be notified through the mobile app, and vice versa. If this employee tests positive, then it will tell Joe through Joe's digital twin, and then all of Joe's contacts in his network will also be notified.
Okay, good. Very good. I'm curious, and thanks for telling us about the demonstration application. Have you gotten any interest in, hey, we'd like to actually do more with that? Or this is really more kind of you're focusing on your technology and not promoting it for its potential uses?
Well, it's interesting you should ask that, because it started when our salespeople were talking about the digital twin service, and I had written a blog which just, in a very general sense, talked about contact tracing, and then one of these large customers for our company said, we'd be interested in learning more about that and how that would actually work and how we could employ it. So we built this demonstration app to show them. We have a load generator, so we can generate the load for a 30,000 person company and also inject statistics about the current positive rate that we're seeing today, and change those statistics. And then you can see when these random contacts are made based on a statistical model, how the interactions cause positive testing or the need for isolation throughout the company. And this can be visualized with aggregate analytics. So one of the benefits of this digital twin approach is that you get the aggregate analytics almost for free. And the reason for that is the state that's in the digital twin can just be brought into an analytics engine and immediately processed. So we do that with our product, our digital twin cloud service, and we visualize then the results. So for example, if you see that an employee tests positive, then the bar charts can show you, well, which sites and which departments at those sites are starting to have an uptick in the number of positive notifications. And you can also ask the question, how many intermediate contacts are we seeing on average? So you get a sense of how widely employees are interacting across the company. All of that information helps managers to control outbreaks and keep people isolated when necessary. Mm-hmm. I think the key to managing the return to work is to catch outbreaks quickly and manage them quickly. And that's what this kind of technology lets you do.
I think you could say that about a number of things, whether it be sporting events and, team events and all kinds of places where we interact with people that we're now separated from, or at least partially.
Yes. So, that's what having this be real time. I mean, if you think about how else you would do it, I get the question a lot, not to interrupt your question there.
No, go ahead.
But I get the question a lot, why can't I just do this in a database? And the answer is, yeah, you could. Some things you can't. If you need a sub-second response time, you probably can't. But for things that 1 to 10 seconds, you probably could do it with a database. However, you end up building a very complex solution. You have to implement a web service that implements the moral equivalent of digital twins without, it's not structured that way formally, but you end up having to have a web service that has a distributed cache managing state, cobble it all together, connect that to a database for long-term storage. You have to then connect that to a data lake and do analytics, connect that to a visualization tool set, and then visualize it. By the time you put all these pieces together and get all of the different skills going, it can be weeks or months. Whereas a digital twin application can be written in a couple of days, and it can be changed within an hour. So if you need new statistics, you want to start tracking something new, you can do it immediately.
Well, the phrase moral equivalent of digital twins is not a phrase I was anticipating hearing anytime soon, or that's one of those unknown unknowns, but no, that's really fascinating. I'm curious about, thinking of, in addition to the COVID situation and health and things like that, there's been so much acceleration of digital strategies and digital applications, and, companies have rapidly shifted a lot of investment to that. I mean, some people say, we've done in the last 5 months, 6 years worth of acceleration into investment in digital technologies for applications. Given the world of sensors and IoT, there are so many, vastly growing sources for all of this data. What if you had to kind of extrapolate and think out loud, what do you think are some of the applications that are either coming sooner now because of the acceleration of digital experiences, or just in the sheer volume and different ways that we're collecting all this data? I'm really curious of your thoughts of what's going to be happening in our world.
Well, I think intelligent devices are going to, the use of them will accelerate. And, if you can manage what you're learning from them and respond effectively to them, then I think they will proliferate. I think there are a lot of uses which are kind of just hobby uses. I mean, a lot of the stuff we see in the smart home and so forth is not particularly high leverage. But in smart cities, I think you're seeing a lot of high leverage use of smart devices. For example, to protect schools from attacks. We saw at the Azure IoT show in February a company which is actually notifying. They have sensors on light posts that on traffic signals that are listening for sounds, and if they hear a sound like a gunshot, for example, or in a school, or the doors are not being operated in the way that is expected, you can notify agencies to respond quickly. So I'd say that with the 5G networking, so you have a lot more bandwidth, a lot more ability to ship telemetry up to the cloud, and with deeper introspection, also combining that with machine learning. That's another thing we haven't talked about, but digital twins can use machine learning to listen to the telemetry and analyze it and respond to it. I think we're going to see a real proliferation of the use of smart devices. But another case is, in the world we're looking at, is also for helping people, not just shoppers. The conventional way people have done shopping with getting recommendations, which are just trying to help them buy more. But using this kind of approach for streaming analytics will allow shoppers to find the products they're actually looking for more efficiently. And also, this is another area we're looking at, is applying it to airline travelers when people start flying again, just as an example, where you can help a person get through their itinerary with handling weather delays and equipment problems and all of the issues that we run into now, where, if you're flying cross country and you have a connection, odds are it's not going to end up the way you think it did in terms of delays.
Don't have those connections. They never work out good.
and yet you're having to respond in when you land and do things which are suboptimal. But if you had, if the software systems are more intelligent about each individual passenger, not just the high value passengers, to be able to offer them opportunities to reroute while they're in flight, and let them know, okay, we're going to have a problem, but here's some alternatives, and get it all set, so you have, in those hours you're sitting there on the plane, be able to figure out what you're actually going to do about it and plan it all out. These are kind of some applications that I think will add value to enriching people's lives. Another one, just real quick, that comes to mind with all the fires we're having out here right now in the West, is disaster recovery. So, being able to have intelligent sensors on not only power poles, but all throughout a forest or a community next to a forest, so you can understand when fires are occurring more quickly and how they're moving, so that emergency equipment can be directed more effectively to both to rescue people and to put out the fire. Having a lot more intelligence in the networks is something that this kind of technology can assist with. And I think we're going to need that.
It sounds like, too, part of what you're saying is, as the complexity rises, because of both the volume and all the interdependencies that may exist or could be associated between all this data, at some point you can't manage all that yourself. You can barely manage your schedule and handle a delay through the airport, more or less. Is the fire going to be here? Is there a fire and it's going to be here in 20 minutes instead of 40? But that sounds like what you're saying is that this technology could help us better manage all our world and all this data that we're surrounded by.
Yes, because we are, in fact, we're billions of data sources producing messages. In some sense, we're rich with opportunity to assist in making our lives operate more smoothly by more intelligently tracking and managing and analyzing this information.
Okay, great. Well, this has been really fascinating. So folks who want to find out more about this with Scale Out Software, what is your website?
It's www.scaleoutsoftware.com.
That sounds good. Nice and easy. At least one thing was easy. All this data coming at us. So it's been really fascinating. And by the way, I like to be wrong, because usually when I'm wrong, that means I have an opportunity to learn something. So I appreciate you telling me, no, that wasn't the right answer.
Okay.
But it was really great talking with you. And I certainly learned a lot from it. And I'm sure our listeners, our watchers will too.
Well, I enjoyed it as well. And thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You bet. Keep us posted too. If the COVID application sort of has legs and takes off, that'd be great. Or other interesting. I'm really curious. As you kind of dealing with all this world of so much data, so much analysis in a real time fashion, as that tends to evolve. Keep us in the loop. Love to hear more from you.
Certainly will. Thank you. Will do.
You bet.
Okay.
So Bill Bain, CEO of Scale Out Software.
Join topic experts and peers for a Splunk virtual event. Observability to enable your digital initiatives. Are your apps and services distributed in the cloud, getting refactored as microservices, or becoming more complex? If they are, you must factor in observability. Observability is all your data to help you find unexpected failure conditions, explain why they happen, and resolve them fast. This event is about the challenges, opportunities, and best practices to successfully build observability into everything you develop, deliver, or monitor. Register today.
Hey, Mitch, thanks. That was a great interview. Good information there. Guys, thanks for sticking around here to the very end of it, folks. This is a great show. It's a great way to start off the week. We've got a really busy week here. We've got some great stuff. Remember, we're going to have a live interview Wednesday at 2:30 Eastern Time. Breaking news. Real excited by that. We'll be back tomorrow with our normal Tuesday show with also some great content. Operationalizing cloud native software with Kubernetes. Check that out, as well as DevOps Experience, both coming up in October. Until tomorrow, though, this is Alan Schimmel from Media Ops, hoping you'll stay safe, stay well, stay strong, tech strong. We're out.